This episode brought to you by Nomadic Research, built for the wild and forged in adversity. Somewhere between the front lines and the firelight, a vision was born. The founders of Nomadic Research spent years in the harshest environments on Earth, where grit and resilience weren't just words, but a way of life. They saw a need for gear that could handle anything, gear that wasn't just built, but built to last. From battlefields to backcountry trails, every piece of Nomadic Research gear is designed with one mission: unyielding performance for those who refuse to quit. The founders believe in patriotism, personal responsibility, and the freedom of the great outdoors, because adventure isn't just a weekend escape, it's a way of life. Born in the heart of Afghanistan, forged in adversity, and built for the wild, Nomadic Research is gear for those who go further. You can start your adventure at nomadicresearch.com. Hey guys, welcome back to the DTD podcast, Dynamic Tales Delivered. This week in the studio, before he became the voice of healing for warriors, my guest was a warrior himself. From the battlefields of Desert Storm to the high-stakes operations of Delta Force, he's carried secrets few dare to speak of, and scars even fewer can see. But it's not just the battles overseas that have left their mark. It's the war within, the one that almost took him down for good. This week, we go beyond the camouflage and commendations, diving deep into a story of resilience, redemption, and the fight to heal others. This is the journey of a soldier, a survivor, and a founder of Warrior's Heart. Stay with us. This one will change the way you see the cost of war. Please welcome into the studio, Tom Spooner. What's going on, my friend?
Hey, DJ. Man, that was a heck of an intro. Thank you.
Well,
I'm looking forward to this interview, man. Thanks.
Yeah, we only had to do it a couple times, so. All right, let's get right into it. You have an amazing career. We've talked to a lot of guys that kind of share your same thing. When you joined in 1990, you've seen a couple of different kinds of Army. And you're seeing the Army, kind of changing as it is right now. So what's interesting about yours is, though, you've always kind of been with the elite your whole time. The 82nd is highly thought of, special forces with Delta, all of those kind of things. We have to go back, though, in the beginning to kind of see what set you up for this, because it's been nothing but excellence in your entire career.
Yeah, that is true. So there was a lot of that. Now the rest of the story, right?
Right.
It's yeah, man. What set me up, and I'll just kind of get it going, is yeah, man. I grew up in a really small town named Belglade, Florida. So I'm southern end of Lake Okeechobee, real country, real rural. But two of my people, in my life when I was growing up were my grandfather on my mother's side and my uncle on my mother's side. Which my grandfather was a World War II veteran in the Pacific in the Army, and then my uncle was a 3-tour Vietnam veteran. So those guys were, my heroes. I mean, I can't remember a time in my life when I didn't want to be in the military. Like that was it, man. My whole life, all I wanted to do was be in the military. And it came up kind of rough. Good family. When I say good family, I mean a lot of love. My dad was an alcoholic growing up, so things were tough. But where I grew up, it was really tough. There was a lot of violence, a lot of fighting. But I mean, I grew up in the 70s and 80s. You know what I mean? It wasn't like how folks growing up today. I mean, fighting was, they didn't even use the term bullying back then. You just got your ass whipped. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was kind of survival of the fittest. It was, lower income. We always had food to eat and everything like that. But it was tough, man. It was, I grew up tough. I grew up in physical violence, but not any more than anyone else where I grew up. And so the question that you said of like just general things that shaped me with that piece is that was it. Just love for the military, growing up tough, and having to be tough and resilient, and learning to survive even at a very young age. So I mean, I was kind of set up for future success. but appeared to be failure at that time. I was the voted the guy, less likely to succeed. I was the kid that other mothers didn't want their kids to hang out with because I was always getting in trouble. And, but I just want to emphasize too that even though it's, a lot of really rough things, and I'm not minimizing that, but I always had a lot of love, man, around me. Had a lot of strong men that were rough, uh, but they were strong men doing the best that they could with what they had, and wanted me to do good, I always had that around.
Well, talking about your grandpa and your uncle that were both in war,
Right.
it's a different kind of soldier back then. Did you ever hear growing up a lot of stories about what they did, or did they mostly keep to themselves?
Zero. That was the only where I got my fix, of war stories and kind of what was going on in those times was never, you can't say that word often, right? But
Right.
never came out of their mouths. Like, no, man, it was not, it was never talked about. Yeah, it was never talked about. But I read all the books, watched all the movies, you know what I mean? I couldn't, if I wasn't watching it, I was reading about, these guys, like my uncle and my grandfather and what they did, the ones that did talk about it and write about it, so that's kind of where, but from them to your point, man, like, yeah, during those times, there weren't even, especially where I grew up, nobody talked about their feelings, number one, those men
Right.
shake hands, they don't cry, and they handle their own problems. You know what I mean? Like that's how I was raised. And so you didn't hear about anxiety or PTS or hell emotions any other than I'm pissed off, you know what I mean? Like, that was kind of it. So very different to your point.
Well, knowing what you know now, and you look back on that and how you described everything about emotions, feelings, all of that kind of stuff, is that good or bad?
Is it good? Man, I wouldn't even, I don't think it was neither. I don't think it was good or bad. I think it was what, in the circumstances that I grew up in, with the people that I grew up in, it was necessary, to kind of be that way. Would it have been nice to have some tools in the toolbox to handle my emotions or even be able to identify them or like, yeah, probably, you know what I mean? But I mean, it was, that's at that point, that's all hypothetical,
Right.
to me. But it was, I don't know. I know that everything that I experienced in my life growing up prepared me for what was coming down the line for me in the future, especially on the military side of the house. Yeah, not so much on the personal side of the house. You know what I mean? Because
Of course.
I come from a long line of family tradition alcoholics. Also, recently in my life, family tradition of sober alcoholics. But at that time there wasn't not a lot of that going on. Yeah, I don't know if I answered the question or what.
No, I think you answered it great. Um, the whole thing about growing up back when you did, when I did back in the 80s, I think it was set up, especially with someone like you, it set you up for success because it seems like every turning point in your career, you join in 1990, you're in war within 6 months of joining. Um, 2001, you go over to Delta, 9/11 happens. There's all these turning points in your life where if it was anything but chaos, I think you wouldn't have known what to do with yourself.
100%. Yeah, because for me it was I was wired. Uh, I mean, at an early age, I was wired. I mean, for chaos and survival and figuring stuff out. And succeeding under any circumstances, those kind of things. So it absolutely set me up for success on the professional side, on the military side of the house. Like, complete chaos, war. I mean, is where I felt the absolute most comfortable. Because I, I mean, I had not the same experience, obviously, especially post 9/11 stuff, but it was, I mean, it was familiar. It was not a ground or arena that I was like unfamiliar with. So it absolutely set me up for that.
You think you were a good soldier in the beginning?
I was, man. That was the one thing about all my life growing up. Socially, I was awkward. I was always a little skinny kid. I was, I mean, I didn't really fit anywhere. To me, and I love playing football. I love sports. I love doing a bunch of different things, but I never really found like, I was getting in trouble. I was drinking too much. But man, when I just stepped into the military, even at basic training, it was for the first time in my life, man. I fit somewhere perfectly, and I was good at it. Because everything else in my life, I was just kind of trying to keep up with, whether it was academics, whether it was sports, whether, I was doing good, but I mean, I was just barely kind of keeping up. But when I got into the military, that's when I didn't have to try to fit in. I didn't have to do anything. So no, I was a good soldier, but I mean, but my, but that's when things like kind of crisscrossed for me was, uh, the working hard, playing hard, raising hell, you know what I mean, living like a rock star, there wasn't one, but living like one, and my personal life and my professional life, they clashed, you know what I mean, in '92. So the first 2 years of my military career in the 82nd. I was, like you said, basic AIT, had already been to jump school, and went straight over to the Gulf. And, even though that wartime experience was nothing compared to my post 9/11 wartime experience, me coming straight from the street, going into a war zone, I mean, it was significant. It was, you know what I mean? I experienced, combat. Um, and that kind of shaped, the reality of what it was I was getting into, and I loved it, on the military side of the house. And interesting thing for me during those times, was the guys that were in command during that. There was still a lot of Vietnam vets in, during that time. Like
That
my
was kind of right at the end of their era.
yeah, my brigade sergeant major, my battalion sergeant major, my first sergeant, my platoon sergeant, were all Vietnam vets, so yeah, I experienced my little bit of combat compared to them, at that time. But it was, and the guys that even in the brigade that I was in, General, what became General Abizade, he was Colonel Abizade, you know what I mean? He was my brigade commander at that time. And you know, I was just blessed, man. Though my whole time I was blessed with senior combat veterans, all the way around me. From my that time, having the Vietnam vets, to my time in group when I had the El Salvador vets, on my team, and then whenever I got out to the unit, I had all the Mogadishu guys that were my instructors during that time. So every step of the way for me was I was set up for sex. I mean, I had to do the work, you know what I mean?
Of course, yeah.
Obviously, but man, yeah, I always had these. If I was paying attention, and listening, not being a knucklehead, I had the answers being given. Answers to the tests were being given to me. It was up for me
Right.
to put into the work. Yeah, I was good, man. But if I didn't get sober in '92, like Mike, I would have burnt my, like, within the first 2 years I was in the military, right? I got my CIB, I got my EIB, I got promoted to sergeant. I mean, I got my Ranger tab. I mean, I was like,
You were
especially
flying high.
in the 82nd, that was like huge because the only guys with Ranger tabs really were officers or guys that had come from the Ranger Regiment or senior NCOs. So here to be a Spec 4 and have all that shit. I mean, I was like one of the golden boys there. And but personally, man, my with my wife and my life, train wreck, and it would have caught up with me, and I would have lost it all if I didn't get sober.
Well, I got to ask you, being that young, when you have all of that experience around you, and you're within 6 months, so you're a private when you go to the Gulf. So you're seeing the shittiest side of war. You're the lowest man on the totem pole.
Yes, sir.
So you not only get to experience the combat, but you get to experience the shit side of everything too, of all the stupid details and all that kind of stuff. But you have all of that experience around you. does it make you want to be like those guys that you're seeing, or do you just kind of want to forge your own path, take their information and forge your own path?
Yeah. So to answer the question, I did want to be like them. You know what I mean? As far as their military careers, what they had done, and you know how they succeeded. And I mean, I've always been hard headed, man. You know what I mean? Like when you said forge my own path, that's like a nice way of saying, you know what I mean? That's like, yeah, man, I don't want to listen to anybody and do what I want to do and like crush it, you know? So I did have, you know, I've really, really been strong, strong and hard headed. My granddad, right before he whipped my ass, would say, boy, hard head makes for a soft ass, you know? And, so, and he was right then. And, but yes, so I did have those mentors and those guys that I wanted to be like. And I had this strong, strong sense of, wanting to, you know, go my own way, you know, and because for me, I didn't really like rewinding a little bit. The only thing I ever wanted to do in the military was be in the Ranger Regiment, you know, be an airborne ranger. That was it, you know, in the regiment. And through a different series of events, you know, I didn't get to go there. I got to the 82nd and did that piece, but went to Ranger school, got Ranger qualified and stuff. But I didn't really have this big longevity career look. You know, I really didn't know what SF did. I mean, back then you barely even heard of Delta Force. You kind of knew that it was there. I knew what the compound was and stuff, you know, but it was this mysterious thing. And man, the NCO, I spent 5 years in the 82nd, and I loved it. Again, I other than like you said at the beginning, eating shit the whole time. You know, once I successfully completed certain schools and all of that, I got treated pretty well. So I spent 5 years there, man. I loved it. I mean, I love being in the 82nd. To date, some of the best leaders and non-commissioned officers that I ever worked with were in the 82nd. And I mean, I just couldn't stay there. You know what I mean? I just couldn't. Like, there's some of them guys, you know what I mean? They had spent their whole careers in and out, you know, doing drill sergeant, whatever, coming back, but being in there, man. And they were just hardcore and they loved it. But I just kind of was like, man, I don't, I love it too. And, you know, I mean, not talking any shit, by any means, but I just kind of was like, man, what's kind of next? Was what, and then it was like, well, and I didn't want to be a drill sergeant or a recruiter, so I had to make a move. You know what I mean? It's like, or go to Korea. So,
All bad options.
yeah, and I was at that timeline, right? I was at that almost 5 year mark where, like 4 or 5 years, you get come down for drill sergeant recruiter or Korea. So that's when I made the decision. I was like, man, let me try this SF stuff, and went to selection in '95 and made it, So that was, but I mean, every unit that I was in, I was just super, super fortunate, man. Of the people that I was with, the units that I was with, and 'cause I loved it. I didn't leave any one of those units going like, "Oh, this place sucks," Then
Right.
I just always wanted to push myself. Like, hey, do I have what it takes to go to the next level? I really didn't think so. You know what I mean? I didn't have a high self concept, but but I was always willing to go for it. You know what I mean? And yeah, but that's what got me there.
Well, you talk about the high self worth, and it's so crazy. Before we got on, we were talking about Tyler, and
Mhm.
that was the same thing about him. He talked about not having a high self value, and that's what always kind of drove him in life. With you, it's so weird because you had the ideas of what you wanted to do. You were strong headed. You had all this experience around you. And you said you wanted to forge your own path and be like them, which can put those sides at war easily, battling with each other. I wonder where that self value, where you finally start to understand I'm good enough for all of this stuff. I mean, you were blowing through stuff within 3 years of joining.
Yeah. And it, because the military, it's like two different things. The construct, of the military, gives you the ability that if you're hardworking and willing to go for it, and have some good intellect and and a hard work ethic, man, you can go far, right? You can be a complete asshole. You know what I'm saying? Like the military, where in the civilian world, you got to have kind of more than one aspect, and the military, you can do that. And so it was mainly just having the guts to go for it. Even with the self doubt, like, man, I don't know if I have what it takes. I don't know if I'm good enough, but I'm not gonna not try. So so that kind of compensates for that. I statements using my low self worth. You know, um, so that compensated during that time, especially whenever I was drinking, and not living the way of integrity in the way that I wanted to for me. And so that compensated for it. Um, but for me, it really changed whenever I got sober. You know what I mean? And really all that did was enable me to live by the rules that I wanted to live by, but couldn't. Whenever I had an issue with self medication. And once I got that under the belt, then I started living a congruent life of like, no, man, I'm bringing something to the table. You know what I mean? Like, not just outside, but also inside.
Of
I mean,
course.
becoming stronger spiritually, emotionally, mentally. Um, but for me, it's always been a healthy self doubt, right? Because it never impeded like, even when I went out to unit selection, man, I never thought I would make it. I just did it. You know what I mean? I was like, and that was with having a good self concept, good self worth. It was just like, hey, man, like, because it was so unknown. It was like, man, and what I had in my mind, what it took to make it was some unrealistic thing that can't even exist. And I went to that just because I didn't want to have the regret of not trying, right? So I didn't want to have the regret of not giving it a shot. Uh, so it was, I mean, like, back to the self-worth kind of piece. It was, once I got sober, that began to go away.
Do you think all of those awards, decorations, whatever you want to call it, do you think that inside that gave you self worth?
It did, man. Yeah, for sure. You know what I mean? Because even I didn't feel that great about myself or thought that great about myself, whatever, this external um, medal, award, certification, tab, whatever it was, it showed that I had worth, even though I might not be feeling it on the inside. And like I said before I got sober, that was all that I had. It was just all
Right.
this external, I mean, reputation, all of that kind of stuff, you know what I mean, was everything was my everything was wrapped up in that. Then later on I was able to fill in, the insides of that stuff too. But absolutely, man.
Let's talk about, I want you to walk me through the moment
Okay.
when you're deployed to Desert Storm. You've wanted to do this your whole life.
Yep.
You make it through 6 months into the military, you're in a combat zone. Walk me through in your mind the first time you're there, what you're thinking about, sights, sounds, smells that I know they have to still be with you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, man. It was, I can remember a few things, few specific pictures in the video, like you just saying, is one of them was, and like I said, man, I was from a small country town. You know what I'm saying? Like, I ain't been out much, you know what I'm saying? Kind of deal. So here I was, what I mean, on this plane, never been over, going overseas. We, uh, we transitioned or we had a stopover in Spain. Torre Torrejon, I think is what it was called in Spain, and that's what I mean. I'm an E2 private. You know what I mean? I came in as an E1. I maxed out the PT test, so I got promoted to E2. You know what I mean? But I think so. I had my little skeeter wings on, and but I remember getting off of the plane, um, there and being in Spain. It's like, whoa, country boys in Spain. So just that effect, not knowing anybody, super overwhelmed. You know what I mean? I was also super cocky and arrogant. That was always the compensation for, what I mean? My being terrified. And so I just remember that layover, and then I remember back on the plane, and we landed in Saudi Arabia, right? And this was like into November, beginning of December timeframe, I think, in Saudi. So that before the air war kicked off in January. So it was when they were in Saudi Arabia. I got off the plane, you know, I mean, it's super hot, man. And as soon as I was like walking down the steps, these F-16s, you know, were flying by, you know, and I got all my gear. I'm in camouflage, going to war. And then whenever, you know, I mean, then those fast movers come by, it was just like, that's when it kind of settled in, like, wow, man, like I'm really like, this is happening. You know, I was super excited. You know what I mean? I was like, that was that piece of it. Um, and then, you know, the air war, a lot of just, you know, normal boring kind of stuff. The next significant thing that comes to mind to me was the you know, whenever we started going across the border and our, you know, nobody had armor. You know what I mean? Like we probably there in the 82nd, and we had body armor, didn't have, you know, vehicle armor. I mean, they were airdroppable vehicles. You know what I mean? It was an
Right.
LBs and you know, so going across, you know, I remember putting a big old dip in, you know, and calls coming in the radio. You know what I mean? Contact, you know, 9 o'clock. But it's a big battalion movement, you know, and I remember being terrified, but also like the most excited in my life, you know. So it was like this whole mix of like just being alive and being like I'm like living the dream, man. You know what I mean? Like I was this was it, man. This was now it was my chapter, you know. When so yeah, that was like to your question of what pops out in my head, like that. Those are the few of the good ones that pops out.
We talked about you earning all of that kind of stuff, but do you remember a time when you're in combat where there's a certain mission or a certain thing you're doing that you know, I'm a soldier, like this is my life right here?
You mean in the Gulf time frame or?
In the Gulf time frame,
Yeah,
because
man.
you were doing stuff so early.
Yeah. No, man, it was even at basic training I had that.
Really?
I mean all the like you said, that moment, everything else that happened after was just kind of a fulfillment of what I knew I was on track for. You know, because back, especially the war piece of it, because you know, prior, you know, you had Vietnam, yeah, they did Grenada, which was only certain, you know, units were involved in that. They did Panama, which only certain ones were involved in that. But other than that, you know, in 1990, there wasn't, you know, I mean, the majority of people had done 20-year careers, you know, and never
Right.
experienced any kind of combat. So to be, because it was all just for me perfect timing, you know what I mean. So I was getting ready to experience it right from the beginning, you know. And I loved it, man. I mean, I know we're going to talk about hard stuff throughout, you know, and everything, but I wanted to be said up front. Like the only thing I regret about my military experience is that I couldn't do more. Like that's my only regret on there. You know what I mean? That I had to end it when I had to end it, which was a good call. But I mean, even with all the bumps and bruises and heartaches and bad times and horrible stuff and tragedies, man, I wouldn't. No, I freaking loved it.
It's weird to hear you say, I wish I could have done more. You were in the most elite unit. And this is thought throughout the world, the most elite military unit in the world.
Yeah.
And you say, I wish I could have done more.
Oh yeah, man. Because yeah, man. Because it's all perspective, you know. Because even I know it's fast forwarding big time, but even like being at the unit, man, it was just like everyone around you is that way. You know what I mean? And you've got these, you know, Somalia guys that are there, guys that have done all this other, you know what I mean? I mean, you're just, there's heroes everywhere you look, man. And all you're trying to do is keep up. One day, but you'll be on top for one day, you know, at some shooting event or whatever. And then the next day you're not because everybody is trying to outdo each other in a good, healthy way. You know what I mean? Like, how do we be stronger, faster, and do the job better? You know, and it was, that culture is just amazing.
Is there one memory out of the Gulf that stands out with you that you'll always, when you think back to that time in your life, is there one memory that you always seem to go to?
Um, no, I mean the two stronger ones that come to mind again, just for that snapshot, because you know, post 9/11 is a whole nother
Of
story.
course.
But is the a couple of things, and again, I didn't really. I was kind of a shell on the inside, you know. I didn't have any spirituality. I didn't have any emotional skills. I was a drunk, badass, hell raising dude, you know what I mean? Like, but not really much on the inside. And some things that come to mind for me is that there was this one vehicle that that we were driving because it was like, I don't know, the majority of the war kind of, we had pushed in, we had set up blocking positions, we had set up roadblocks. It was probably, if that all happened in February, this was like March or April, so things had kind of died down, but I mean, they were still, it was still war. You're still doing your things. And we were going to get a bunch of target practice in with the 50 cals and stuff. So we're using this old burn up vehicle. And in that vehicle, so I was the private, right? So Humvee's pulling this vehicle that we're going to use for target practice. Standing next to me is like, I like kicked out the skeleton that was left in there because the whole thing had burned up. But then when we're driving down the road, the wind's blowing, I'm driving that vehicle and I'm looking over there, and all this dirt and dust that I was like, man, I'm like breathing in this burnt dude's body.
Yeah.
Like, how fucked up is that? You know what I mean? I was like, what? But that, what I mean? Just like the surrealness of it all. It's like, what? You know what I mean? Like, that one kind of comes to mind because it was just, I didn't know what to do with that. You know what I mean? It was just like, what? This is just weird, and, and then, but that was, oh man, there was another time too, whenever it was like, okay, whenever it was like next level, every kind of next level in war, it was, 'cause, man, it totally sucked. You know what I mean? We left Saudi Arabia and we just like drove in through the desert and kept driving through the desert and driving. You
Well,
know,
because wasn't the original plan, they thought that they were going to meet a bunch of resistance when they came across,
oh, yeah,
and
man.
there ended up being no resistance really.
Well, by the time we got there, because the tanks, the tracked vehicles were out front. Obviously, big time tank mechanized war, and we were coming in behind them in our 5 tons and deuce and a halves, and and Humvees. So we were pushing across that way. So a lot of the mechanized in front of us, I mean, they were getting into battles and everything. But a lot of times when it got to us getting, they're continually pushing the
Right.
front, and but we were kind of doing cleanup along the way. Then we would go through the bunkers. We would, do all that kind of different stuff. And so it was pretty different.
Yeah. Um, we know that the Gulf made you a better soldier. There's no doubt about that. What do you think it did to you as a person, though?
And so a few things, right? At this part of my life, I got to separate um, both. I have my professional life and my personal life. So my professional life, man, it really set the tone. Like as a private, I understood why battle drills were important, like discipline is important. Why all that shit I thought was stupid in basic training. You know what I mean? Was like, oh no, this is, and then I got the example of good leadership and bad leadership and guys that really shouldn't be in the infantry, but they are, you know what I mean? So I was just like gifted all of this information, and so it helped. Hey, this is who I want to be like. This is what I, what I mean, man, it made it, from the get go. I never had, like, I learned those lessons immediately as far as moving forward. So professionally, it really it set the tone, what I mean, for everything that followed out of that. That and my platoon sergeant that was the Vietnam vet, between those two things. Personally, man, it was wow. Like I already, like I said, was a bit of a hot mess, as a human. I was married, and I mean I was 20 years old during that time. I turned 21, in Iraq. And so but personally, like I hated God, and then you see, war, you see the devastation, you see innocent people getting killed, what I mean, collateral damage, all of that stuff, just all the brutality of it, what I mean, I hated God even more, and what I mean, and when I got back from the Gulf, my drinking just increased more, my violence in Fayetteville increased more, what I mean, I mean, it was like kind of that scene of the movie, the crazy ass veteran ranger qualified, what I mean, all of that hoorah stuff, which I loved, what I mean, but it was just this mix. So professionally, it was amazing. Personally, because I didn't have the tools to deal with it. Yeah, I just dealt with it with more drinking and more violence and more crazy shit.
Well, I'm glad that you bring that up because you have spoken on multiple occasions openly about your alcoholism.
Yeah,
You've
yeah.
done it on this show already. But I kind of wonder, when was the moment you decided to get sober, and when did you know I'm at rock bottom? It's got to change.
Yeah, man, I know exactly when that was. It was September the 1st of 1992. That was the last
Wow.
time. That was the last drink that I've had, up until today. And then, and so, but what happened? It was a buildup, right? Like, everything was falling apart with my wife and I, man. And I love my wife dearly. I mean, like, but I didn't act that way because I would get drunk and I would do, maybe not good stuff. Because under the influence of alcohol, that's what makes me different. Someone that's not alcoholic, like they get drunk, and they get silly. Like everybody, when they get drunk, they do stupid shit, right? I mean, when I get drunk, I'm that guy that you're like, bro, you shouldn't do that anymore. I mean? Even from drinkers, even when you're drinking buddies, you're saying like, man, you might need to like take it easy. You know what I'm saying? That's
That's definitely not a good thing.
especially when those guys are infantrymen in the 82nd. You know what I mean? Like, so just a very distinct difference. But yeah, man, I was so inside. I mean, I wasn't living. I had a ton of shame and guilt and remorse. You know what I mean? I wasn't the person that I wanted to be. Whenever I was sober, I was mostly that person. I was a little rough and a little, you know, hard around the edges, but I was a decent human being. But when I get drunk, man, all bets were off. I would do all kinds of shit that would compromise my own integrity. Meaning the things that I said I would never do, I did. Under the influence, and so all of that was going on. And then I was killing it in the military, but I mean, I was drinking more. I was even come drunk, but I was getting away with murder because I was with the Golden Boy. You know what I mean? I had all these things and was doing everything, so I was getting away with it. And but then my wife had finally had enough. Smart woman, you know what I mean? And so we ended up getting separated. Because she's like, "You keep doing this, that's it." And I kept doing it because I couldn't not. And so we separated. And I'm living in the barracks, and she's in the apartment. That was devastating. And I knew, man, it was just a matter of time before I got in trouble at work. You know what I mean? Because I was already getting in trouble at work, but it was right after the golf, and things were a little bit more freeing then, and then until the Clinton years came, you know what I mean? That was pretty wild west even during that early '90s time frame. And but that's what happened, man. When I lost my wife, when she was done with me, I mean, like done, like bye, you know. And then I knew the only two things I loved at that point was my wife and the army, right? And so lost her, and I knew I was going to end up getting in trouble at work. That's what got my attention, man. And I wasn't being the man that I truly wanted to be, And so everything caught up to me, my professional life and my personal life. I mean, they crashed into one another, and it wasn't like I could quit my job, right? I'm in the army, what I mean? Continue to be in the army, but that's when I made the decision to, man, I need some serious help, and I wanted. The whole thing is like the simple version is we always say is like, hey man, when you get tired of living, we get tired of being sick and tired. You get sick and tired of being sick and tired. Then you do something. And I did something, and what I did was I went to AA. That's how I didn't get sober on my own. I got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous and 12 Steps.
What was your drink of choice?
Jim Beam and Miller Lite.
I'm guessing probably together at the same time with how you're talking. So
One the other at a time, and anything else in between. If those weren't available, they would be. But it was if it was alcohol, I was happy with it.
do you remember the last fight with your wife before she left you? Do you remember what it was about or what had
Oh yeah,
happened?
man. It was like I mean, she had said it was the last night that I got drunk. There was a bunch of stuff that happened, but before I went out, to my uncle's farm, we're going to hang out and we're going to get drunk, and before she left, she's like, "Hey, if you get drunk tonight, that's it," And I was like, "All right," because it had been, I mean, months and months and months of this crap, and All right. And then so me and the guys, with the guys were at the barn hanging out, drinking, the bottle's coming around, man. And I looked at that bottle and I was like, I knew it was gonna happen if I drink this. Like if I take a drink, like I'm gonna lose my wife. And I was like, ah, and I drank. And so whenever and I passed out, whatever that night came to, ended up going back home in the morning. And of course she's like, did you get drunk? Knowing the answer, you know what I mean? I'm like, yeah. And then that's when she exploded and like, kicked me out of the house. And for as little person as she was, man, she took a 12 pack and hit me in the back with it. Like she was a 160-pound man, something like that. As I was walking out the door, don't forget your beer. I say that in a funny way. It wasn't domestic violence or anything,
No.
It was, especially during those time frames, man. And it was, and that was it, man. That was the last fight. And the only reason why we didn't get divorced like immediately was in North Carolina. You have to be legally separated for a year before you can get a divorce. So we immediately, got legally separated. I lived in the barracks. She was in the apartment, separate ways, and of course, I wanted it to work. I wanted to get back together. I wanted to do all these things, but she was done, and she's a very smart woman. You know what I mean? To be done. Because anytime in the past when I said I was going to change something, I might for 30 days or,
Right.
but it didn't happen. So it was awful, man. Personally for me. One thing that kept me alive during that time frame, or not alive, kept me hopeful and like in the fight was I love my job. You know what I mean? And I was good at it, and so I just totally threw myself into learning how to live sober and being the best soldier I could be. That's what I did.
How that first walk into AA, and you have to tell this room full of people that you don't know that you're an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Is it demoralizing? What are the feelings that you have when you have to finally step up in front of everyone and admit this?
Right. So, I usually say odd shit that people don't normally say, right? So here's going to be another one. Is
Okay.
to that question, it didn't bother me a bit, man. I even share about it in the meetings when I'm telling my story. I'm like, I was like, man, I didn't know what an alcoholic was, right? I didn't think it was the bum underneath the bridge. I didn't think, I just thought one day you went into one of these stupid ass AA meetings with these stupid ass people, and you raise your hand and you say you're an alcoholic. I've had, I have admitted worse things to better people. So it didn't bother me a damn bit. You know what I mean? I'm an alcoholic. I'm an asshole. I'm something like I don't even, because those people meant nothing to me, and I hated every one of them, and I hated the fact that I was there. I hated myself for even being there, because in my mind, AA was for a bunch of damn weak people that couldn't handle their own lives. As I'm sitting there, I'm thinking that. You know what I mean? Like I'm in the room with these people by choice, but that's just how like twisted and unhealthy I was mentally and emotionally and spiritually at that time, man. But it was what got me at that point, because that gets some people right, like for them to admit that, like that's the thing, right? That's the thing they refuse to do, avoid. For me, the thing was admitting. So the first step is admitting you're powerless over alcohol. So me admitting that I was powerless over alcohol, like this shot of whiskey, is ridiculous. That, especially when my life revolved around violence. Power meant violence. So if I got you by the throat, how are you going to talk to me about powerlessness? I've got all this power. And but admitting that I'm powerless over whiskey, over drinking, I mean, like, no, man. Well, I tell you what, it's at 62 days at not drinking, and I know it was 62 days. I knew what powerlessness was because I didn't want to drink anymore, like for real, for the first time. And I wanted to drink so bad I couldn't stand. Then I understood. So I got my bottom that got me in, my drinking, my last drunk. But then the real internal bottom occurred for me in that moment whenever I admitted to myself, that I was powerless. I couldn't not drink on my own. You know what I mean? When I fully got that one, man, that was that moment that you're talking about. That was the surrender. That was like it, that, and in retrospect, I can tell you why it was so hard, because of how I came up, because of my time in the military, even up in there, it's like I was super tough and I was super vengeful. Because you could beat me, you could take all my stuff, you could lock me up, you can do whatever, but eventually I'm gonna get you. Like tomorrow, 10 years from now, 30 years from now. Like I always had this thing inside of me that refused to surrender to anything. And in order for me to get sober, that was the thing that I had to give up, because in my mind, powerless meant if you were powerless, my experience with powerlessness was you don't have power, whether it's physical power or whatever kind of power, like you're going to get your ass handed to you in this world. Like, so that's why I resisted and resisted. So the hardest step that I had to do was admit, you know what I mean, to my innermost self, that I needed help. I was powerless over alcohol. So that was that moment that you're talking about. For me, was alone in the barracks room, you know, conceding to my innermost self that, man, I can't do this on my own. I need help, and that was the turning point for me. That's whenever I went all in on this stuff that I did not understand. Talking about feelings, talking about spirituality, talking about God, talking about resentments and fears and past hurts and all that stuff. Because it went against everything I was raised to believe in. Again, remember, men shake hands, they handle their own problems, they don't cry, right? That's what men in my life. That's how they, what I mean. And now you're telling me to talk about my problems. You're telling me to ask for help. It's not in my DNA to ask for help, man. Like, so
How bad were the first times that you start admitting this stuff, your emotions, your problems? How bad are you at it? Because I have a feeling that you were horrible at it when you first started doing it.
oh my God, I was awful, man. I didn't, number one, I couldn't even label them, man. Like all I knew was like, cause I could rip through every single emotion within 30 seconds, from restless, irritable, discontent, shame, guilt, remorse, fury, anxiety, panic. You know what I mean? Like that's just, I was so unraveled as a human being. You know, yeah, man, it was, this is how bad it was for me even whenever, because I got a sponsor, and he walked me through the steps, and that's where I got everything that I need, the relief that I needed, everything that happened. But yeah, man, the good thing about getting sober though, it's not a lot about, there's not a lot of feelings involved in getting sober. That's like later on, you know what I mean? This is like, because getting sober, what I mean, is saving my life, right? So I needed to save my life. Now, what I did with it, that was on me. But you know what I mean? That's what we say in AA. It's like, hey, we're here to save your life. You want to save your soul or anything else, like that's somebody else's department. What we're here to do is enable you not to die and to live without drinking and using drugs. So that's the business being conducted in there. Feelings and all of that stuff, man. Yeah, that especially like if they're as wound up as me, that you need a professional. You know what I mean? Like you need someone that has a PhD or some, LCDC, like some kind of things around them. Me and my buddy just ain't gonna work some shit out. Now we can work out I mean, but that is to your point of where I learned and began to deal with me, and what went on inside of me was with other warriors, right? Because there wasn't a warrior's heart back then, right? But I got sober on Fort Bragg. So the meetings that I went to on Fort Bragg were with other soldiers, right? So we spoke the same language. We had this shared life experiences. We had a peer network, right? I could speak all the Army acronyms and shit, and we could relate spirituality to military, and anything we're trying to learn, we could turn it into a military exercise. So the value of that, enabled me to excel a lot faster, than talking with folks that didn't understand, kind of thing. So that's what really helped me. And so through these buddies of mine that we're on the same path now, because I always say, like, that was in 1992, man. I didn't get sober and become a freaking hippie. You know what I mean? Like peace, love, and joy. And
Right.
I mean, I got peace and I got love and I got joy, in my life, but I was still a freaking man killer. You know what I mean? Like, I was in 92, I mean, I retired in 2011. you know what I mean? And all that combat. So that was the greatest thing in the world for me, was to learn that I could be, it wasn't this or that, right? That wasn't the case. It was this and that. Like I could be a barrel chested freedom fighter, meat eating, you know what I mean, killer, uh, and love my wife and act that way and be a father, you know what I mean, and help other men. Like it made me even a better warrior, you know what I mean, because I was more convicted. I was more, had more conviction because
Clear-minded.
yes, I was clear-minded, and I was living congruent with my own integrity. You know what I mean? I meant what I said, and I said what I meant, and I did what I said I was going to do. And if I didn't, I cleaned it up. You know, just the simple things like that. So, so when I cleaned up, my personal life and my military life were both good, man, then that's the rest of my career. You know what I mean? That's
Well, and you can definitely see it take off from there. I mean,
right. Yeah.
yeah, I mean it skyrockets after that.
Yeah.
Um, I want to ask you though,
Yeah.
that's got to be, you know, you said all of us could talk the same language and everything, but that's got to be one, a weird place to get sober, because military, first responders, all that kind of stuff, you drink when you're happy, you drink when you're sad, you drink when the day goes good, when the day goes bad. There's all of these things, and for you to step away from that completely, as embedded in it as you were,
Yes.
it's got to be, I mean, you got to go through something doing that.
Yeah, yeah. It was because, you know, I'm not the alcohol police, you know. It's like alcohol is a huge part of our communities, law enforcement, military, all first responders, you know, it's, there's nothing wrong with alcohol, right? It's a big part of what we do together. However, for some of us, not everyone, you know what I mean? If alcohol is, you know, bringing your job performance down or is destroying your family, like that's a problem. You know what I mean? And it should be a problem, you know? So for me, like you said, it was like, now I'm not that guy anymore. I was one of the ringleaders, you know what I mean? You know, and now I'm like this dude that's not drinking anymore. And, but I'm still in this same environment, again, in the 82nd, in the infantry, you know, and with all this time. And it was, but that's, it goes back to me. I can be this and that. You know what I mean? Because it was, I didn't get sober and become a hippie. It was just like when guys would say, because I used to be that guy, like if you didn't drink with me, I didn't trust you, right? Like if you couldn't drink like I drink, then you weren't worth it. Like, so I get it, right? I was that guy. So now I'm on the other side of the fence, you know, and but I'm still me, man. I still love to fight. I still am a war, you know, all these different things. And when I would get challenged with like, well, I don't trust guys that I don't drink with. It's like, well, I don't trust guys I haven't fought with. So you want to go fucking fight, or do you want to, you know what I mean? And then they would look at you like, well, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, what are you talking about? Like, what does that have to do with anything? You know, so I was very aggressive at times when it needed to be, you know what I mean? Because again, I didn't, I mean, there's a, you know what I mean? There is the old saying, like, you know, your audience, you know what I mean? You know where you're at. You can speak a certain way here, you can speak a certain way here, and now you're at home. It's not being fake. It's just using the right toolbox, you know, wherever you're at. And in that environment, the only thing that is respected is, you know, is tough, hard things, you know. So I continue to be tough and hard, and that's what's always funny because we have a lot of guys on active duty, you know, in spec ops that come through Warrior's Heart, and they can't say you don't understand to me, right?
Well, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? They can't say, well, man, I was at my buddy's funeral and he was my best friend. And I'm like, yeah, and you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I did 16 years in special operations sober. You know, so it can be done. But the thing was is that the reason why I did make it through all those really tough times without support, meaning, you know, having meetings, you know, having my people around me after the work is is because I got after it, man. You know, what I mean, I'm all in whatever I'm doing. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't like half-ass. I'm not only going to do something half-ass for a little while. Like, I'm either in or I'm out.
Right.
I mean, I'm an extremist. People say I have an addict mind. They can label it all kinds of things, but I just know that I got two gears and one speed, forward and reverse, and it's always on the floor. So it's so AA and the men around me and the men that I still have in my life, they keep me pointed in the right direction, like a Claymore mine. You know what I mean? Like I'm that way. You know what I mean? I can't change who I am. I can't change how I am. But what I can do is live in such a manner that this extreme, now I'm doing like extreme good things, right? Not extreme, because whatever I'm doing is going to be extreme. So let's stick on the good side of the house.
It's going to be the most beautiful thing built or the most destroyed thing you have ever seen in your
Absolutely.
life.
Absolutely.
So I guess what I have to, ask you about that is your first therapy session to go to, because you said you can do it with buddies. AA is not there for it to admit these things. Your first therapy session, how does that go? I mean, do you remember it? Do you remember? Because I feel like in your head, there's a lot of fuck yous to the questions that are coming out.
A whole bunch, man. So there's again, back in the 90s, right? We're talking early 90s in the Army during that time. Um, Man, they didn't, uh, there wasn't feelings, there wasn't nothing like it is now. You know what I mean? Like the closest thing they did with alcoholics, that were drunk, they put them in the nut ward up on the fourth floor at Walmart. You know what I mean? Like we would take meetings up with those guys. So there wasn't, I mean, they had some ADAPSI programs and whatever like that, but there wasn't even a lot of, no one was counseling. It wasn't even a thing. Like, oh, I should go see a therapist. Like, it wasn't even a thing. Like, no one even said that. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
so I was, the first time I saw a therapist was in 2010. So all the way that time, you know what I mean, from 92 to
Wow.
2010, so 18 years of being sober, but I didn't need it. Like I had strong enough men in my life, and then I had grown in such a manner that I had uh, emotional, like I wasn't afraid to be emotionally vulnerable. Like that's how strong I was. Like it didn't bother me. So I would talk about what was going on inside of me just with my close friends. You know what I mean? I'm not telling everybody my business, but I had men in my life, other warriors that I would share my feelings with, that I would share, I mean, we would talk through different things. We would come up with plans, I mean, we were working through everything. But the first time that I saw a therapist was in 2010.
So how old are you at that time?
2010, I was 40 years old.
Okay. So you're 40. You have 40 plus months of combat underneath you. Uh, you know, when you go in there, I guess I got to understand the reason why you go there after so long. You said that you were able to stay sober. You were able to work through your emotions, however you work through them.
Yeah.
What was the thing that sent you there then?
September the 1st of 2006. That was whenever I ate I happened to be with the 82nd guys at that time in Iraq. I ate an 82 millimeter mortar round that was probably about 20 yards away, and I got a undiagnosed and untreated TBI. So that happened. Because I can tell you what my life was like. I've had a bajillion concussions, and again, being at the unit, everything was explosively breached. I was an 18 Charlie. I was an explosive guy. I fought football. I mean, I've had concussions throughout, but I can tell you what my life was like before September the 1st of 2006, and I can tell you what it's been like after. So that's significant of a pivotal event, um, which is that it was my third mass casualty event. So I got emotionally broken, and then I got hardware broken, actually in my head. And so from that point on until 2010, when I saw that therapist, what had built up over that time was a whole bunch of crazy undiagnosed TBI stuff, and untreated TBI stuff, but also a lot of emotions and moral grief and injury uh, that had occurred. And I just call it unprocessed trauma. You know what I'm saying? You can label it PTS, you can label whatever you want to label you want to throw of it. The truth of the matter is that it's emotion that is trapped inside of me that must come out, and it hadn't. You know what I mean? So therefore, I wasn't healthy at all emotionally. I'm still sober. I was still getting other guys sober, still going to meetings, still doing all my thing. But the issues that I was having, the 12 steps in AA by itself could no longer help. That was working. I mean, I was sober, right? That's what that shit does. It gets you sober in a good
Right.
life. I had that. But what I needed in my life was a lot of TBI therapy, and a lot of PhD to help me process, and for me even some meds, to process and weed out and go through those emotions. But yet again, back to your question, that's kind of lead up to the question of the first therapy session, right? Is yet again I get presented. So I'm a big God guy, right? You know what I mean? God is a huge, huge part of my life. Spirituality, you know what I mean, is a big deal. That was the game changer for me in getting sober, and the daily game changer in my whole walk through life, right? Uh, so I was in 2010. I knew I was going to get out, right? Because they had already gotten diagnosed with the TBI. I got diagnosed as like, hey, I'm basically working at 50% processing speed and 50% of verbal memory, right? So that was like that was a gift having that information, because I thought I was just losing my mind. And so I knew I had that. And then, then and like I said, I'm sober, man. I know I got to talk about it. I know I got to, and I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, I know I have to do these things, but I'm not talking to, I'm going to talk to about it. Nobody wearing a uniform. I'm going to be talking to somebody who's bound by law, you know what I mean? To not say other than what they have to say, so I cause you know what I mean? This is 2010. I'm at the unit and had been for almost 10 years, at that time. In 2010, you didn't hear about the veteran suicide rate. You didn't hear about PTS. You didn't hear about TB. I mean, a little bit here and there, but again, in that time frame, and you damn sure never heard about any of that stuff coming out of special operations. Zero. So I knew what I needed to do because I was going to live, and I know in order to do that, I have to talk and seek help, So I did a military one source. They still have it. I just saw them there. They still have it. You get 10 free visits off the books. That's what I
Wow.
call military one source. And because my cognitive therapist, because I went to WAMAC and I was in TBI therapy, and they're like, hey man, you need to get other. Like, I know. I was like, but I ain't talking to no military doctor. And they're like, okay, well, military one source. So I did that. So this is how I picked my therapist. Like, if this is the phone book, I'm like a therapist. I'm like this one. Right. So because that fuck man, I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. I'm like, sure, I'll talk to a therapist. So that's how I picked it. Right. So I go into Fayetteville into this place called the Rain Tree Clinic. There's this, it's a, where therapists work. And so I go down there, and this guy that I randomly picked, I'm in the office and I'm in bad shape, man. I'm, TBI wise, like I'm getting out of the military. Like I'm doing okay, man, but I am unwell. And so I'm going to therapy, and when I pulled up, I seen this red Corvette and it had a Silver Star tag on the back, but it's Fayetteville, man. Like, I don't know, you see thousands of those. So it was like no big deal. And uh, so then I was like, I seen this old dude on the back porch, smoking a cigarette and stuff. I'm like, just hyper aware of everything, and so then I go in there and they call me about, Mr. Spooner, come back. I go back and it's that dude that was smoking a cigarette, in the back.
I'm sure that was his car too.
And it was. And so he was a Vietnam veteran, and he was in the Phoenix Project as a Vietnam veteran. So just assassination, you know what I mean? So right off the bat, for me, God provided me the therapist that I needed, because I told you how I picked him, just like random.
Right.
And so I mean, this was the guy that was my therapist, and the first thing I did is I established what he could and could not ever say by law, and then we kind of started talking, and we talked about expectations, and but because I had been living the way I've been living, meaning sober. When I say sober, I don't mean just not drinking. I mean mind, body, and spirit, right? Like I'd been in my family, you know what I mean? Like I was either working or I was with my family or I was helping other dudes in AA, right? So I was living a good life, man. I was living like what all these guys post-military talk about living, you know what I mean? A lot of the guys, you know what I mean, don't get better until after. Like, dude, I was living that stuff in 1993. You know what I mean? It's like, so my whole military career, like, I was sober in combat, you know, and so what this therapist, this guy who obviously I couldn't say you don't understand to, you know what I mean? Like, we were just able to have that common ground. So it was like I didn't have to. I could just say a few words, and he knew what I was talking about. Right? I didn't have to go into it. And I mean, I went and seen this dude for like 6 months. You know, it started off twice a week. You know, and then we moved to once a week, and then we moved to once every other week. And I needed even to be on meds during that time frame. A light dose of Zoloft was what they had me on at that time. And I was, you know, I mean, like I said, I was doing good things and on track to doing good, but man, it was fucking hard, man. It was hard. But this dude, man, he just helped me with living. You know what I mean?
Right.
If you took 100% of the time of all the time that we talk, the deep, dark, nasty stuff that was war related was maybe 10%, right? I mean, it really out of all that time, because what he helped me with was what I wanted the most, which is how do I engage with my children? How do I be a good husband? What do I need to do now that I'm not deploying every 4 to 6 months? You know, I don't know how to live this full time being at home shit. You know what I mean? Like what do you do? I'll go to a movie. But he would say things like how important it was for me to have one-on-one time with each of my sons. He asked me, it's like, how much one-on-one time do each of your sons? I have two sons. Because you know the mo during that time is we had limited time together, so everybody's together. You know, anytime free time that we have. You know, so that's good, but not the best. So now that I didn't have the cloud of having to deploy, you know, and he's just like simple things like, man, you're going to get some gas in the truck, like just 10-minute drive. Get one of them to come with you, you know. So he started teaching me how to be a dad and not teaching me how to be a dad. I gave him accountability. He gave me accountability because he's a man I respected. And when I asked him for help, he told me things to do. So it was my responsibility to do what he asked me to do. And I would do those things and I was getting the results, right? I'm a results based guy. Even when it came to alcohol, like you said, whatever the flavor was, if it gives me what I want, like I'm doing it. Don't care what it tastes like, feels like, whatever. So these things this man was asking me to do was producing the results that I needed in my life, which at that time the military was over, gone, done, over with. You know, I'm starting a new life now outside of the military with my family. And so I needed a lot of help with that, man. Just from a technical perspective, you know, like and tactical, not, you know, I mean, the love has always been there. The relationships were already established. Now it's like, okay, how do I do this full
So before we get back to your military career, I got to ask you, what's the hardest question? And we jumped way ahead because I had no idea that it was 2010 when you started. But what do you think the hardest question you had to answer with him?
time? He never asked any question. What's making it difficult isn't whether I'm going to decide to talk or not. Is is he never asked. I mean, he was such a good therapist, and that's why it's so important that if you get a therapist, like you get one that's good. You know what I mean? That's been doing it a while, and not just a little certificate on the wall. But he didn't really ask the hard questions. He would maneuver me in such a way where we got into that space, and whatever came up in that space. Um, is what we would talk about. So in essence, that to answer your question, that's how he asked me the question. So the hardest thing for me to talk about was there was this one time whenever I killed this one combatant, right? You know what I mean? It was ROE was good, everything was good, it was moral, ethical, legal, all that stuff. And shutting down a foreign fighter pipeline, you know, but again, nothing secret, nothing, you know, it was just a mission. And it and it and it and it always bothered me. And the reason why it bothered me, and I didn't understand this until I learned about what they call moral grief and injury, is because I understand regret, right? Regret means, Tom, take this event, and if you could do it all over again, would you do it different? If the answer is yes, then I have a regret, right? So now that same thing, like this same like kind of awful event occurs in war, and you asked me, Tom, would you do this same thing that you did? I say, yeah, I would do it 1,000 times over, the exact same way, and I would do more of it because of the results that produced by it. People's lives were saved from it. But for some reason, it still bothered me. You know what I mean? That was what was jammed up inside of me because it didn't. It was like this loop that was going around. It was like, oh, I regret that, right? Because most things that really eat us up, it's like, fuck, I regret doing that, and I wish I wouldn't have done it, man. And if I had a chance to do it over again, I'd do it differently. But this wasn't the case. This was a category of something I wouldn't have done it differently. I would have done it multiple, 1,000 times more, and it still bothered me. Why? Why? It didn't, I mean, it didn't land anywhere. Well, the why behind it is because I'm a freaking human being, man. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, the ROE is good. I mean, I never had a problem killing guys. You know what I mean? They never had a problem killing up. You know what I mean? It was like, hey, dudes that had professionals, right? I'm talking about the crazy. You got professionals on the field, man. Like we are there to fight. You know what I'm saying? Like we have trained our whole professional lives to get to this spot, and now we're gonna do it. You know what I mean? And may the best man win, kind of deal. So it's not. I've never had a problem with that. And then that I was having that problem is that I'm a human being, and for me, just me, is I don't believe human beings are meant to hurt one another. Man. I don't. However, ever since there's been human beings, there's been war, right? So, so that's the need for a warrior population. And however, it doesn't exclude me from humanity, right? From being a human being. And whenever I remove another human or harm another human being from this life, even if the cause is right and everything, like I'm going to pay for that for me. And I'm only speaking for myself. Like there's going to be a chip away. What it was is a chip away at my humanity. 'Cause I'm a human, a pretty damn good human, on top of that, and I love just as hard as I fight, and so that was, but then whenever I learned about that, so what I was experiencing was the grief of my humanity. Man, it's like we're in this situation called war, where something like this is necessary, what I mean, for lives and brutality and things to be taken, everything the war is, I can't not be a human. Um, the people that aren't bothered by that are sociopaths. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Because it's like the because they don't, I mean, those kind of people that their wiring is different. Like they truly, it doesn't bother them, right?
Right.
You know what I mean? What bothers me, like I said, I don't have any regrets about the decisions that I've made in combat, everything, man, all of that stuff. But this is just a part of that price is that, man, like, hey, I'm a human, and whenever you harm other humans, I mean, there's a price to pay for that. It's not God, Matt, my belief system. It's not God punishing me or Matt. It's like, no, man. It's like kind of like gravity. You know what I mean? Like you jump off a freaking roof. You know what I mean? Like depending on how you jump from, you do a good PLF, you're going to be all right. But if you're higher than that, you're going to break a leg. If you're higher than that, like gravity is not mad at you. It's the law. You know what I mean? And so, but that's
Never heard someone describe it that way.
yeah, yeah. So it's but that's back to sorry to all that sidetrack. Back to that question. That's what it was in talking with him. It was hard for me to talk about that because I couldn't categorize it. All I could talk about was the event, like, and the event was a normal event, like especially where I work. I mean, we did multiple hits every night during the day, all that stuff. So it was not anything uncommon, but this one thing was just jammed up in this loop, and it was because it was in the moral injury and grief.
So I guess my question from all of that would be, why him? Why that guy?
Why that guy? It was completely and totally situational and in my path. You know what I mean? I'd already gotten, like, I was getting out, um, so I could be free of talking about what was going on inside of me because I didn't want to lose my security clearance. I didn't want to lose my job.
No. I think you're misunderstanding the question. When you talk about that instance where you you struggled with your humanity and all of that kind of stuff. Why that guy specifically that you killed? Why him? Why was that the event that?
It was the situation. It was a situation, and it was what, in my experience, for a lot of people, not everyone, especially guys that experienced a lot of war. When I say a lot, I mean like over years. You know what I mean? So for me, it was almost 10 years of in and out, in and out. For me, it was this accumulation occurred throughout, because you have all these significant emotional events, losing buddies, almost dying.
So he was the match point.
Yeah, he would. It was just at that point, man. He was no different than any. I mean, I could list literally hundreds of the exact situation, and I never had. And each one of those things, which some of them were exactly the same situation, but to your point of why this one that's still in my mind right now, if I want to conjure it, it's because of that in lack of better words, the accumulation up into the one.
Got it.
This is the one that kind of got me, uh, you know. But it didn't stop. I mean, that was 2000. I mean, that was like, when was that? It was like probably 2008 ish time frame kind of deal.
So you still had 2 more years on the
Yeah,
ground.
I had more deployments coming after that. So that was just, I had all of these things because again, I was doing my AA work. I was doing with my sponsor. I mean, like killing it. And these things I was struggling with is outside of the realm of help. I mean, it's just like when your car's broken down, you don't take it to a plumber. What I'm saying? Like you take it to a mechanic. Right. So if I have
Right.
problems with my brain, I need to go to a cognitive therapist, and a neuroscientist, and a neuropsychology. If I have problems with my emotions that I can't sort out with myself or with my buddies, then I need a professional. You know what I mean?
Right.
Not some armchair kind of psychology where we get drunk and fucking cry and talk about all the guys that we lost and love them so much and bullshit. But yeah.
You know, to go back to now, we got to go all the way
Yeah,
back to
I don't even
90.
know where we
We,
are right now.
yeah, no, we got to go all the way back to 92 because you get sober. September of 92, I think, is when you get sober. A year after you became sober, your wife comes back.
Yeah.
95, you go into special forces.
Yep.
You deploy to Central, South America.
Yeah.
All of these kind of things. Your life is on the upturn. Your military career is on the upturn. What made you go, I need to take it to the next level?
Yeah. So for me, man, I freaking like I said, I left 82nd. My family's good. I'm a solid whole human being moving forward, killing it, crushing it, loving life. In group, like I said, I had El Sal vets on my team. I just was around these guys, man, learning. I love the SF mission. I love to teach, you know what I mean, which is a big part of the SF mission, one team making a battalion. We got to do that, in Colombia, in South America. One thing we didn't get to do was take them to combat, right? But it was everything up, so it was, again, man, I'm just continuously like living my best life, man, like living the dream. And then in 99, we had our first son, you know what I mean? So that now I'm a dad added to that thing, so another thing I never thought I'd have in my life, so it's like, yeah, man, it's just going good. And I love being in group. I'm a senior E7, got 11 years in, on my way to being a team sergeant because any SF dude just wants to be a team sergeant, and, but then I was at that time frame where, again, remember I said I left the 82nd when it was drill sergeant recruiter time frame. So
Right.
now I'm on a team for almost 6 years. Like they're going to want me to go to SWIT. You know what I mean? And I don't want to be an instructor. I'm being selfish. I want to get after it. So I was like, so I want to, and I didn't want the regret because I mean, of going to the unit because I could have easily just stayed in group, man. I was on track, promotion wise. Like, man, I was tracking to be a SAR, be an EA, be a SAR major early. Like, I was on track, and I didn't want the regret of not giving it a shot. So that's what I asked myself, and I've learned throughout my life to ask myself that question is like, will I regret not doing this? And if the answer is yes, if I regret not doing it, then that's my answer. Like I got to do it because life, I have enough things I regret in life. You know what I mean? I don't need to add things that I could potentially not. That's just simple practical logic. But, so that's why I went, man. And, like I said, I didn't really think I love being in group. So it wasn't like that. Like, oh, I got to get out of here. Um, I was like, man, I'll just give it a shot. And I just like come off a trip from Ecuador. I was in really good shape anyway, but I wasn't where I want to be to go like selection. I mean, dude, I'd been for 11 years. I had driven, rode, ran, rucked around this fucking compound my whole career. You know what I mean? Looking in there, trying to see what's going on. You know what I mean? And so it's like, hey, here's a shot to see what's out there. And it's like, okay. And, so, and again, I was like, yeah, man, I mean, when I say I didn't think I'd make it, like I'm going for it, but I'm a realist. I'm not like I got to burn the burn the ships kind of guy. You know what I mean? I can be that convicted and have a contingency plan, you know, so I was like, yeah, man, I'll go give it a shot. So I put all my paperwork in and everything. Yep. I'm going to go, you know, in September of 2001 to selection, you know, later in the year. Then, of course, September 11th happened, and then I think it was sometime before the end of September. Man, I was at selection. Yeah, like
So it changes though. I mean, granted, going to Delta Force and you know, going to selection for that is one thing,
yeah,
but to go to it when you know, well, maybe you didn't know, but the entire world is about to change.
oh yeah,
The landscape of warfare, the landscape of relationships with the Middle East, and you're going to be the very, very tip of the spear.
yeah, man. For me, how it fell out was, you know, I was in seventh group at that time, Central and South America. September 11th happened. Everything that went down had that selection date coming. So it was like 2 or 3 weeks after. And I go to selection, you know, and you're isolated, you're thinking all this stuff. And the only reason why I made the decision to go to selection was because I was in seventh group. If I would have been in fifth group, you know, that's their AO, I wouldn't have went to selection. I would have went with my team to combat. Because again, I'm a professional soldier, which means I just preparing to go to war. You know what I mean? So how quick can I get there? You know, and so but I was in seventh group, and I'm like, man, seventh ain't even the rotations ain't gonna come around for a while, and I don't even know if I'm gonna make it. So let me give it a shot. So I went to selection, made it, but that moment where it really hit was after selection. You know, made it obviously, and then I had to leave because I was on brag. You know, I was just getting ready to, you know, just go down the street, and so that's all I did my whole 21-year career. I just went down the street. I was in the 82nd, went down the street to seventh group, went from seventh group down the street to, that was my whole career was on brag. But, but we went and visited my in-laws that are up in New Jersey, my nieces and my brother and sister-in-law. We went up there in New Jersey. So now we're that close. And so this is mid to end October, you know what I mean, of 2001. So I mean, it just happened. You know what I mean? The pictures were still up. We didn't know that everybody was just gone, right? They still were looking for everybody. So at this point in time, I have a 2.5-year-old son and an 8-month pregnant wife. Yeah. And so now, and I've just made selection, and now we go to ground zero, and we're there. You know what I mean? Like, man, the steam was still coming up. It still smelled like a charcoal fire that you put out, you know, like a campfire you put out, you know, that steamy smell, you know what I mean? That was still fresh, man. It was all going on. And we went over to the Empire State Building and got up on it, you know, and then I got my pregnant wife, my 2.5-year-old, and I was looking at the smoking hole, you know what I mean? That was ground zero. And that's when it hit me. And it really, what hit me the most was not so much, so professionally, where it hit me was like, wow, man, like this is like I'm getting ready to be in the premier unit if I make it. If I don't make it, I'm still going to go back to group. You know what I mean? So like, hey, and everything that 9/11 produced, you know what I mean, as far as the justice that followed after, revenge, whatever you want to call it. But what got hit me hard was what I was about to put my wife through. Like, you know what I mean? Like I knew 100%, like she's getting ready to be a single mom with a newborn and a 2.5-year-old, and her husband is going off to war. Like I knew it wasn't going to be short, and so I had a decision to make then, because I could have easily said no, you know what I mean? But lucky for me, I knew who I was as a man. I knew who I was as a soldier. I knew what I believed in and what I stood for. And so did she, right? Because it was never me against her. Once we got back together, it was me and her against everything else. So that's when, to your point, though, that's when it really hit me, the gravity of it. It really hit me what I was about to do to my family. On the professional side, I was like, going to the Super Bowl again. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, living again, Tom living his best life, living the dream. Now at the top of the food chain, at least in the Army. You know what I mean? That you can get to. And yet another dream achieved that I never thought I would have. And then
Well,
another
let's
son. You know what I mean? After that, so
right. Well, let's talk about that. When you said for 20 years or for I guess 11 years, you drove by this place, you rucked by this place. You step in there and you're stepping into the shadow of giants. And we're finding out now, the longer time goes on and the more guys like you that come and speak out and tell those stories that need to be told. But you step in, and more than the 82nd, more than special forces, you are stepping in the way of giants. And you said it in the beginning. You got guys that were Mogadishu. Tom Satterley's one of them. Brad Thomas is one of them. I mean, Kyle Lamb. I mean, you're in the Hall of Fame now, and you walk in.
And those guys are my instructors.
Right. You got to tell me what you're feeling, because just knowing their stories and knowing what they went through, and especially, like we said, the Black Hawk Down guys, you really have a reputation to uphold now.
Yeah.
I mean, you're at the pinnacle. So tell me about those emotions going into that.
Oh man, yeah. So at first it was like, well, the whole time ecstatic, you know what I mean? Because I was going through the gate, not riding, not being around it, you know what I mean? So it was just, I mean, ecstatic, you know what I mean? Like, achievement wise. I mean, also, I mean, going into the training course, I mean, it's not guaranteed. Selection just gets you, I mean, your foot in the door. Now you really are going to have the axe over your head every day with those kind of guys, right? So I was in the other guy, like the sergeant major kind of in charge was John Hale, who was a team leader, in Mogadishu. So not only did you have the guys that were young guys in Mogadishu, then you had the dude that was a leader there. You know what I mean? And that was just in the training part. And then, in the rest in the building, there were a whole bunch more. But yeah, man, it was just so motivating. It was I stressed myself out a little bit because it was like, man, every day I come through those gates could be my last day. So, and I didn't want it to be my last day, right? So my stress level would increase, and then finally because of the tools that I had in my life, it was like, man, I took that stress off of me. It's like, well, if today is my last day here, it's going to be a good one, and so man, but like you said, when you're around that caliber of warriors, you know what I mean, that are battle proven beyond any shadow of a doubt, whatever comes out of their mouth is gospel as it pertains to warfare. Like it is, you just in awe, and just like I would, what I mean, I was like, I knew how to be a student, man. Yeah, I was a senior E7. Yeah, I had all these things that I had done. Super proud of all of it and owned it. And these guys were next level, something that I didn't, I had the fundamentals to get to that level, but somewhere that I mean, I am not. So it was just like you said, in awe and in appreciation and in gratitude, man. It was like every day I came through those gates, man. Everything that you said washed over me, the history of the place, the people of the place, just all of it. It's the most amazing place on the planet, man, for a warrior anyway.
So let's move forward then to you go to combat with them for the first time. And like we said, you're in the Hall of Fame now in combat.
Yeah, man.
You're
So made it through training, get across the hall, and then so I'm going, and then so it was the fall of 2002 was my first combat deployment at the unit, and this is just normal hit, man. You know what I mean? On the trail for Bin Laden, you know what I mean? Everybody knows the books and stories, and but for me, there was a lot of things again going on internally and professionally. So professionally is good. Internally, I didn't know how I was going to be in combat sober, right? Because it's a new experience. I knew what I was like, not sober, now sober. It didn't bother me. It was more just kind of interesting, like, whoa, what's this going to be like? And yeah, man.
10 years sober. We shouldn't gloss over that. That's 10 years sober when you're about to go to combat.
Yeah. Yeah. So all that time in group, deploy and everything. So I got a lot of reps under my belt. And so we're going, and it's and then it's kind of again, my introduction into places is new. Not new, is kind of extreme. So I end up breaking my nose. When I say break my nose, like that way, break my nose right in the back of the truck. We're getting on this C-130 to take us, where we needed to be to get us off and get going. This thing that I had in the back of the truck, I was holding down. The wind from another C-130 picked it. So basically, a 2x4 hit me across the face. You know what I mean? And like it broke my nose, crushed this down here, cut the nasal artery. There's like blood everywhere. So I almost didn't get to go on the mission. And I was just thinking like, this didn't happen. There's no way. Like everybody's loading up, and this is my first, hit in the big leagues, and but luckily enough for me, there was battle hardened dudes, you know what I mean? And I had my wits enough about me, you know what I mean? And they're like, you good? I'm like, yeah, I'm good. And they're like, all right, get on and go, and so I did it. So it was epic, man. You know what I mean? It was like I was the new guy on the team, you know what I mean? Obviously we had a few months to train up together. And my team's just amazing, and everybody else, I'm the freaking new guy, and but I handled myself well. I did everything that I was supposed to do when I was supposed to do it, and lived up to what the team needed me to do, and I acted appropriately. If it was being merciless or merciful, you know what I mean? I was appropriate in every situation, man, which, okay, I can do this thing sober, and yeah, man. So it was, introduction to like, welcome, you get to do your first hit with a broken nose, and welcome to the party, and so yeah, that was my first one, man. It was just amazing, man. I can't say enough good stuff about it.
We should talk about the speed that something like that happens in law enforcement. The first time when I went over to be a detective, and the first time you breach the door on a search warrant, yeah. It's so fast. Did you feel the same thing on your first mission there, that it's over before you know it?
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely it is. And that is funny that you mentioned, like you said, the speed at which it was going. Because whenever I was in group, they had the teams designated. I was on a CQB team, right? So we did house SWAT tactics, as a team. And I always wondered, I was like, man, can these guys really be that much faster? You know what I mean? Like, because everyone that I could compare myself to, like we were our team was the top of the food chain, or one of, and it's like, how much faster can you actually do this, right? Well, I found out. Luckily, that never came out of my mouth. You know what I mean? I just was internal. When I got to my team, you know what I mean, the 2IC, the boss on the team there, he said, he's like, hey, throw chem lights and try to keep up, because like you said, we're about, like when you mentioned speed, yeah, man. And, when you're a new guy, you can't see everything that the older guys can. You're kind of, in training, you're kind of looking through the straw, and then you get a little bit more. And then, like you said, that first one, you're all wide eyed and everything, but it's all, you're looking through a straw, and it goes down, especially when you're doing it right. You know what I mean? It's done within seconds.
How was the adrenaline dump after that one? Because you'd been in combat before, but this is a way different. Like we said again, it's way different. Do you remember the adrenaline dump at the end?
It was good, but it wasn't really that's the thing, man, about being in the unit is you can't compare it to anywhere else. The intensity of the training that we used to joke about it all the time. It's like, man, we can't wait to get to combat where it's less dangerous. Like the shit that we would do in training. Because everybody tries that way. Hey, train as hard as, train hard and then combat's easy, The unit, of course, next level is everything, where it's like, okay, training missions are death defying. Like if you screw this up, man, like you're going to be maimed, you know what I mean? If not dead. So it's like the level of training that we did, the nonstop, even when people would get hurt. When I say hurt, like fingers blown off because they screwed up on a charge, and all they did was say like, "Hey, yeah, next team at the door." You know what I mean? So we were already in that mindset, man, of like, so you had already got a lot of as close to combat reps as you can get. And so combat was actually slower and less intense than it was people on the catwalk watching you, you know what I mean, grading you. So yeah, but it was, but I'm not minimizing that first one. But man, the thing that I had on my side was I was a senior experienced guy, just wasn't doing it with these group of guys, man, and
Right.
it was awesome.
So we talked about 12 combat deployments, 40 months in combat, 11 to Iraq, 1 to Afghanistan. What's the difference between the two to you?
It was completely different missions, different time of the war. When I was in Afghanistan, and we mainly would react to time sensitive targets. So we weren't like on a fob out in there all the time, and it was still, I mean, we're still working a lot of things out. So it wasn't a lot of like intense, drawn out combat scenarios. It was doing hits, doing different missions, coming back, resetting in the gym, training while we're in combat, still. And then, so that was my Afghanistan rotation, a lot of really good missions. Um, but then the rest of the time was in Iraq, so it was a lot of my first, obviously, were in Afghanistan, and they were all really good. And then the rest of the time being the full picture, was in Iraq. So it was completely different, but I only have one point of reference in Afghanistan.
Of
You
course.
know what I mean? If I'd have been at a FOB somewhere, that would have been like just on the teams that I was on, that's what we were doing.
Is there ever a point when you're over there? Because we talked about 11 combat tours to Iraq. Maybe as you get older in your career at Delta and stuff, but do you ever look around and go, nothing we're doing is going to change anything over here? It's going to be the same when we leave. We're doing good things. We're taking bad guys off the board, all that kind of stuff. But fundamentally, this place hasn't changed in 1,000 years, and it's not going to change.
Oh, I knew that going in. Yeah, for me, that's like, because a lot of the guys nowadays, really struggle with, we lost Afghanistan, lost Iraq, I mean, all this stuff, a lot of guys really, really struggle with that. I was just, again, back to being fortunate and putting in the work. Man, I knew I had already, in 1993, I had already figured out what this was all about. Uh, Not politics, not all that, because this is what happened in 1993. Battle of Mogadishu happened, right? Gotha Serpent happened in 93. I was in the 82nd. When I was there, and I was sober, right? I was almost a year sober during that time. So I got my shit together. I'm aware of what's going on. Prior to those days, you know what I mean, whenever that happened in Mogadishu in 93, if you would have asked me, Tom, what do you think your country would do if you were killed and drug around the streets of a country by the enemy? What do you think your country would do? I was like, I know what they would do. They would annihilate everyone that did that to me, right? If you'd asked me before that newspaper came out, you know what I mean, before those pictures and those videos came out, and then before Clinton pulled us out, right? So whenever that happened to American service members and we did nothing except leave, I had to make a decision because I was like, shit, because it blew that away. Like, that is not the truth. That is a delusion to think that just because something happens to me, my country's going to do something about it. Yeah, there's scenarios they would or whatever, but hey, it's being presented to me that it can be possible. So I had to reconcile that within myself. That what I came to was is that I'm in the military uh, because I choose to be in the military, and I choose to fight alongside the men that are to the left and right of me, and their care is what is important for me and us accomplishing the mission. You know what I mean? The mission, health and welfare of the troops. Like, I reconciled that in '93. So when 9/11, when all that came on, man, all that we did was we were just buying time, right? I mean, it's whack-a-mole, it's all that, those different things. So I knew that. And again, I was a senior dude by this time, in the military age wise, you know what I mean?
Right.
I'm 33 years old, you know what I mean, when we went into Iraq, you know what I mean? 33 years old. I've got 13 years in the Army, all my career, you know what I mean? O&I, operations and intelligence. I mean, I'm a smart dude, world traveled, all that stuff. It's like, man, I knew it was a numbers game from the get go. That's all we were doing. The thing that for whatever reason that our country has never decided to do is like, I mean, when you occupy a country, and if you want to stabilize it, we know how to do that. Don't we have bases in Germany? Don't we have bases in Japan? Don't we have a base in South Korea? like, so if we wanted to truly stabilize an area, we know how to do that. The United States knows how to do it, and you do that. But that was never going to happen, from the get go. So, I mean, to your question and point is, man, I knew it from the get go. So it didn't, the outcomes, I mean, all the wonderful things that happened, like the women's rights, the votings, people having peace for at least a while. You know what I mean? Like all the big win of the whole Iraq is Kurdistan, what happened to them. And, and they're living the dream now compared to what Saddam and, yeah, man, but I knew it. I knew it from the get go, and I was good with it. I was still down. I was like, my boys are here. I'm here. It's a worthy mission. Let's go.
Well, and being good with it is one thing, but it's a very strange thing because you have to look at it too in law enforcement or first responders. It's the same thing for a different reason, but you're a number, and it's a really hard thing for people to wrap their head around that you do this job that's honorable, whatever, but you're just a number. And not you're not just a number to the people out there, you're a number to the command.
Yes.
That's all you are.
Yeah.
Just like you said, someone will blow off their hand, bring the next team up, because we don't have time to stop. This machine is too big and it's moving too fast to stop. It's a very strange thing to look at the end of your career and go, did I really do anything? Because I'm just a number.
Yeah. And that's what set me up for success, because I knew that. I knew that, that because that's a level of maturity what we're talking about. You know what I mean? Because
Right.
but it came through experience. It's not because I'm smart, because of the things that I had to deal with along the way. And the things it was worth dying for to me. You know what I mean? I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm doing this for me and mine. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'm doing this for community, and I'm doing this for a country, whatever my skill set is. But it's just like, that's what makes it even. And I've always said, I mean, when I got out, I trained law enforcement up and down the East Coast and all over for almost 5 years. You know what I mean? So I got to experience it every opportunity that I got, which was every class was like, hey man, law enforcement has it way harder than the military. And then the law enforcement says the same thing about the military. So it's kind of cool we have that respect. But here's the difference. The difference is like, hey dude, I went to another country. Went to another country and did all this stuff. Yeah, all that stuff, super proud of everything I did in battles. And yes, it's very different than on the stateside here. Yes, to all of that stuff. I left there and I came back here. Wasn't nobody trying to get me. I wasn't trying to fight anybody either. I'm just like, skipping around, enjoying my life, taking my kids to games and shit. Meanwhile, law enforcement, y'all deploy every day, at least twice. You know what I mean? You leave in the morning. So you leave your family loyalty chain at home, and now you pick up your loyalty chain of the law enforcement brothers and sisters. you do what you do during the day, and then like, oh yeah, you're redeploying tonight. So whether you shot somebody, someone spit on you, all the shit y'all guys had to deal with, and now you get to go home and now what's for dinner? You know what I mean? And now help them with the homework after you just killed somebody or had to, experience awfulness of even a car wreck. You know what I mean? And like, so get the fuck out of here, man. Like you guys are deploying at minimum twice a day. God forbid you come home for lunch. You know what I'm saying? Because that adds a rep in there. But that's what I've always said, man. Emotionally, conviction. That's the thing that I loved about talking with law enforcement is it's like, yeah, the tactics, yeah, because I love the gunfighting piece, right? And gunfighting's gunfight, man. Whether you're in Baghdad or Baltimore, two dudes with rifles inside the house, like there's only certain shit that works. You know what I mean? ROE and all that. But then I really love talking about the inside stuff, right? Because I got my inside straight back in '92 and then continued to work on it. Now I'm able to articulate to these guys what it feels like being a coward and knowing that you don't ever want to be that. You know what I mean? They get the experience of being there for your guys and what that feels like. You know what I mean? And to wake up in the morning and go and answer the question to myself, why am I doing what I'm doing? Because like you said, command, I'm a number. I mean, yeah, Jimmy loves me. I know he would do anything for me. But when I say a number, it doesn't mean that the command doesn't care for you while you're on the job, because they do. But if you leave the job or can't perform the job, hey man, you're out, someone else is in, man. That's the deal. And so reconciling that emotionally and mentally, how I was able to do that was very simply is like I do what I do because that's what I choose to do because I say so.
So you own it.
Yeah, I own it, man. That way, and if we line up, hey, hey, yay me, right? You know what I mean? Like, hey, you actually do care for me, and you actually, you're a great leader and all that. Like, yay me. But if you're not, what I mean, I'm going to do what I do until I no longer believe or I'm incapable of doing what I'm doing. And that's because obviously it's not easy, but it is that simple. It is that simple. But there's like a whole bunch of things I got to reconcile. But that's what I tell all the young people that want to join the profession, because there's a lot of folks that, law enforcement and military, well, it's like, well, you shouldn't join. I mean, when Trump came in to change things a little bit, but man, I've always talked to young people where it's like just with the conversation we're having, it's, hey, know this. You know that you're joining the military or this profession, firefighter, any of it, because that's what you want to do. Not because so and so wants you to, not because this, not because that, man. It's like, because, hey, there's going to come a time and a place, man, you know, where it's going to be, then law enforcement, I always go back to, it's going to be you and another dude. In the military, there's going to come a time and a place, it's going to be dark, it's going to be scary, you're going to be alone, and you're going to be with another man, and you're going to be fighting for your life.
So
That's what it comes down to.
the next question to that then would be, we've talked about it a little bit, 1,300 direct action missions about with you. How do you keep your humanity?
Yeah, man. What the rules? You know what I mean? So for me, the first thing that comes to mind when you ask that question, what enables me to keep my humanity, we'll call it on the battlefield, but on the job, if you're law enforcement, because we're in that scenario, there's the mission that we're there to do, and then there's rules of engagement, right? That's our, you could even call that's our humanity on target. You know what I mean? That's the rules we're agreeing to operate on. Right. So if I'm doing that, then okay, that's keeping it good on there. But then off of it, what I mean, having to deal with the humans, and again back to law enforcement, I mean, you're dealing with other Americans, man. It's not like other than that, they look like us, they talk like, I mean, you know what I mean? Like sometimes not, but you know what I mean, predominantly, man. It's like you have to have such a strong spiritual and emotional and mental tool bag, man, to carry around with you, because you're going to need to process all that stuff, man. You're going to need to be a dad when you go home. You're going to need to be able to turn dad off and to be put the warrior on. You know what I mean? You're going to need to be able to switch through these channels. And like me, the reason why I got sober, I didn't have the ability to do that. So I don't have the ability to do that, I'm going to lose something that I love. Might lose the job. I'm going to do something stupid, or I might lose the family, you know what I mean, somewhere. But I mean, how many sad freaking stories do we see in our population of guys getting drunk, getting high, or doing stuff on the job, off the job, man, or dudes retiring? I think the life expectancy of law enforcement is 5 years. You know what I mean? Once we've done a 30-year career or something like that. So the need, what I love about where we're at in life now, 80% rule, you know, is like, there's not an excuse for our profession to not be getting help. Now the command might not be down with it. Like, hey, they might be the old guard. If you come forward, you're going to lose your job. I'm not saying that, because there's a lot of that out there. But dude, there's enough stuff online. There's enough stuff, you know what I mean, that's out there. There's enough organizations that keep things under the radar. Um, and then if you have good commands, I mean, dude, we have active law enforcement come to walk. You know, we have active duty, active law enforcement, active firefighters coming here because certain commands, you know, have shifted. But there's no excuse for our population now. None. There's enough of us talking about it. There's enough resources that are out there. Um, yeah, there's no excuse for any of our own to suffer the way that we've had to in the past because of lack of resources and lack of folks talking about it.
When you look back at your career in Delta, I'll ask you the same question that I did before. Is there something, a mission, an operation, something that happened that when you think back on it, you always think back to that, whether good or bad?
On the good side, the thing that stands out the most to me is whenever I was in the training course, right? So I'm just in the training course. I told you my wife was pregnant, you know, whenever we went to do that. Well, that means now she's getting ready to have a baby here in January, right?
Right.
So now it's January and I'm in the course. She's having a baby. She has a baby, you know what I mean? And then this is a course that you don't miss days of the course. You know, you don't screw it up. You're gone. You know what I mean? Like this is the show, you know, and so one day, uh, you know what I mean? And you're this new guy. You haven't even made it. You're not even a new guy. You're a freaking student. You know what I mean? And you got these legends that are, you know, above you. And well, one day the black Suburban pulls up with that sergeant major I told you about, Hale, you know, and he's like, yeah, Spooner. Well, I'm out. You know what I mean? The
He
black
personally
Suburban
came
shows
to
up
tell
with the boss. You know what I mean? Like, and we get in the
you.
car, we get in there, and when we start driving to the gate, he's like, "Hey, man, here's the deal. You know, your wife's okay, but she's had complications, and she's in the hospital right now in Womack, you know, on post." And he's like, you know, we pull up. He's like, he hands me a cell phone because this is 2002, so it's, you know, there's still kind of a thing. They're like, hands me a cell phone, keys the vehicles, like go up there and sort it out and keep me informed. I'm like, okay. So I do that, you know, and my wife was having some difficulties, a lot actually. And so I was out for a couple of days, you know, and came back. And then I was, you know, still continued training, kept him informed, everything was good. And then she got sick again, back in the hospital, same scenario. Now I'm out a few more days. So I probably missed 6 or 7 days of this course. So I'm thinking, like, at best, I'm going to get recycled. You know what I mean? Or they're going to be like, hey, man, your family's too much problem children. You know what I mean? Like, you're out. So that's what's going on in my mind. And Sergeant Major told me, he's like, hey, man, whenever she's solid, you know, and you got folks to take care of her and everything's good, you call me and let me know. And it's like, okay, Sergeant Major. I mean, he's going to tell me, you know. And so I call him. I was like, hey, Sergeant Major, they're good to go. Like, I'm good. And he's like, okay, well, this is the deal. Is you're gonna go to the Raleigh airport tomorrow. There'll be a ticket waiting for you. You're gonna meet up with your team out at Fort Campbell, and you're gonna continue on with training. Dude, I just start laughing, like literally. Like I'm like, hey, Sergeant Major, like, what are you going to like? Do you want one of my kids or something? You know what I mean? Like, because this doesn't happen. Like, I'm a student in my mind. I'm a student. You know what I mean? None of this is like I'm getting ready to get kicked out probably. And he said, man, we're just doing what's right. So
Then
that's when I
that
knew that I was in a different place.
right.
And again, you can't compare the unit to any other unit because it's so small and it's so well funded and it's so different. Like where when they say take care of the family, they take care of the family. You know, when they say take care of you, they take care of you. And that's
I
what I
think that
do.
for the first time, would you agree, even in special forces, this was the first time that you were really allowed to be an adult.
Yeah.
You have a job, you have a mission, do it. Don't blindside us with stuff and move out.
Yep. First time ever. And again, it's not a hit on the other units. They're less funded
Of course.
and bigger. But man, it was just like that big of a deal to me. It's like I'm somewhere I'm somewhere different, man. Like what they mean what they say when they say, hey, we're here going to take care of your family, because they tell you that in the briefings, you know what I mean? But they, you know what I mean? But they meant it, you know, and it was and while you might do a more dangerous job to do it more times than the other folks, the care and the funding and the you know, everything that's given you, man, it's just amazing.
So when you get out and this world kind of comes to a close, it's all you've ever wanted to do your life. I mean, hell, you got sober to continue doing that
Yeah.
life. Like, and you do all of these things. You see so much of the world in combat, and you get out and this world comes to an end.
Mm,
Is it tough for you?
devastating, because I was that super lifer guy, man. Like I was going to do 30 years, right?
Right.
You know, but what happened 2010 was so I had already in 2003 I broke my back. Um, you know, then deployed, and then some reason it didn't heal right. and,
Yeah,
and
that's
so in
weird.
2004 I had to get back surgery. So I had some significant back trauma, then re-injured my back. So in 2010 I couldn't wear kit anymore without taking narcotics, right? And that wasn't gonna work for me. So I had effectively spent my entire military career not doing any bullshit jobs, right? You know, I left it all the like when it was time to be a drill sergeant instructor, I went to SF. When it was time to go to the
Right.
schoolhouse, I went to the unit. Now it's like, okay, now I can do this. Like I've effectively avoided for 20 years any bullshit job. Like, why would I stay just for a job other than being a kid? And so that's whenever I decided to get out, you know, and then that's when they found out, you know, because I got all the testing that I had the undiagnosed, untreated TBI. I had all that unprocessed trauma going on. You know, I was really not well, you know, and but you know, I mean, I got a cognitive therapist. I went to all the different therapies, and the stuff works, you know, and I got better. So, but I was still very angry, man. I was angry, kind of at the whole thing of it, you know, because here I was, this dude, finished being a team leader, you know, and I, you know, man, I had a whole lot more to go still, you know what I mean? And but it was over. But again, I go back to the God thing. For me, man, thank God it was over, because that's what my family needed, right? My sons were like 7 and 11, you know what I mean? Like my family was on the ragged edge because I was on a team during that whole time. You know, I was at the team level doing all those deployments, and so it was, and I couldn't have stopped it myself, you know, because my brain wasn't working that good, and I would have just kept going. But again, the sequence of events put me in a position to where I was getting out, and it was, and I was pissed off about it, and I had a lot of emotions going on. But it was time, man. And again, looking back on it, super, super grateful. But it was really hard, man, because I didn't even know what an E8 retirement pay was, because it wasn't even my purview. Like, and
Right.
and then here's the interesting thing, man, is when I started finding out what E8 pay was, like how do you do this retirement thing? Like what is this? I looked at myself because I'm a planner, you know what I mean? I'm a pretty smart dude. I plan stuff out and everything. And I was like, man, why haven't I ever even looked at this right here? And then it dawned on me the reason why is because I never expected to make it there. Like I had accepted that I was going to die doing what I was doing. I mean, a lot of my buddies already did. Statistics are statistics, bro. You do it enough times, you know what I mean? Like it's a
Right.
math game. So, and I didn't have a death wish, and I don't remember ever consciously doing that, but I did. Somewhere along the line, I said, you know what I mean? Like, hey, you know what? I believe in this mission. I believe in the men that I'm fighting with, and if I die doing this, then like, hell yeah, you know what I mean? I'm good with it. So therefore having, and like, again, I never consciously thought of that, but through all the events and all the funerals and all the names on the wall, I just accepted that, hey, I'm going to be a name on the wall. And like, I'm okay with that, man. Again, I didn't like do crazy stuff and have a death wish. I just, so it was a hell of a thing to realize too. It's like, okay, because now it's the big question, right? Now what?
Well,
My whole world, my whole life from a child to now was about one thing, man, and that was it. And now that's all over.
so then before we move into what you do there, the kind of final question to that would be, what do you think in all of those years, the pieces of you that you lost, and what did you gain?
So I didn't lose anything, but the scales got tilted for me. So if you looked at me being healthy, mind, body, and spirit, uh, 80% of me is that, 20%'s got some issues, let's say, and then the 20 issues part became 30, and the 30 became 40. So it ended up rotating, like being a little bit more unhealthy than healthy. And so the team started becoming a little bit more important than my family, which that violated my integrity. You know what I mean? And so, but I couldn't stop it, but because I had a TBI that affected my executive function, my decision making, I couldn't figure it out, you know. And so I didn't really lose. I lost some health during that time, when I was more unhealthy, but I gained that health back. And when I gained the health back, then I made sense of all the experiences that I had. You know what I mean? Like how I can articulate what happened to my humanity. You know what I mean? How I got chipped away during that time. But at the time, it didn't bother me. But how come it bothers me now? I can articulate all this. So I'm like super, super grateful for all of those times, because what I've learned, even what I learned back in 92, when I learned about being sober and I learned about this life, and is that all of the experiences that I experienced in life, even the tragic, horrible, what the fuck ones, for me is about one thing. Um, Number one is for me to grow through it and learn it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit down with another man at some time in the future, or another warrior, female even, and they're going to be struggling with what I've already experienced, and I'm going to be able to tell them my story, and that's going to give them two things. It's going to let them know. It's going to let them know that they're not alone. Number one, and then the second thing that's going to do is going to give them hope, even if they don't know what that's going on. Right. So that's why I'm grateful for even all of the, like, even what the fuck things, you know what I mean? Like, me and God got a few things to talk about, it's something like, hey man, I know, like, what's up with this one? Like, but even with all of that stuff, man, that's where it all becomes real to me, because it just got me in that vein when you were talking about it. Because even a time after I got out and I was training law enforcement, man, and I was doing valuable work, right? The Army gig was over. I accepted that. I had moved on, and now this thing, I was still struggling a lot, man, cognitively, and with my emotions at times. But I'm doing good work. My family's good. Everything's good. And I would have be this self pity would creep in and be like, man, was it even worth it? But then I'd be training in New Jersey or even in New York, and I'd go by ground zero. Yeah.
And it would make it all worth it again to you?
Yeah. Because I would remember. I would remember whenever me, my pregnant wife, my son were there looking at the smoking hole, and yeah, and it would, yeah, man. And I would go sit in those churches, where the firemen were sleeping, man. And I would sit there and I'd soak it all in. Not even so much the actual memorial, right, and everything they have now, which is wonderful, but the gritty shit, you know what I mean? That's still standing, what I mean, in those firehouses. Just do a little walk, man, and then I'd be like, oh, now I remember. Yes, it was all worth it. You know what I'm saying? But
Yeah.
I've had several times where I've needed to revisit those places because, I mean, fuck, man, life's difficult. Plus, when you start getting older, I mean, it's a gift, you know what I mean? I'm grateful to be privileged to get older. And man, the shit starts hurting a lot, you know? Like things don't work the way they used to. And you know what I mean? But it's just
Right.
like, but I got to remember that it's worth it, right? Otherwise, I'll start feeling sorry for myself, you know, and I'll start getting angry, or start getting disgruntled, I'll start losing the joy in life, you know what I mean? Because it's easy to do, man. We've lived through a lot, you know. I mean, I've done a lot of things, you know. I could easily and justifiably, you know, get into some self pity, and some people would even agree with it, you know. And but I'm my responsibility, right? It's my responsibility to do what I know that needs to be done in order for me to stay on track. And for me, that requires a team of people to help me stay on track.
So let me ask you then, when you do Warrior's Heart and you do this thing, what do you think your biggest fear being a civilian now, starting Warrior's Heart? Do you think that your biggest fear was, I don't know how to put it. Was it judgment? Was it that this thing was going to fail that you did? Was it something deeper than that? What was it that you feared the most about starting Warrior's Heart?
I feared, I feared that Warrior's Heart not working, mainly. Again, me saying weird shit, right? It's like I feared mainly, man, because it was I feared that it didn't work. I knew it was going to work for the guys and gals, right? So that was because everything that we do here is based off of our own experiences. You know what I mean? So there, I mean, it's proven. You know what I mean? Like, I knew that it would work. I didn't know that it would work as a job, meaning that I could get paid for. Like, you know, that I could also be one of those guys that I'd been in my military career where my job and my dream is the same thing. You know what I mean? There's so few of us,
Right.
rare thing, you know, because I was struggling a lot in 16 and 17 when, because my tactical business got upended, you know what I mean? And my physicality wasn't that great. And I didn't, and I had basically one more run in me. Like, you know what I mean? I can only start something, you know what I mean? I've only got one more run in me, you know, to be able to provide for my family and provide for my brothers and sisters, you know, and this was going to be it. The good thing for me is the partners, Josh and Lisa Lannon, that my wife Lori and I, you know, got, you know, in partnership with, you know, knew what they were doing also on the business side and running a rehab, you know, the business aspects of it that I didn't have experience with. I had experience on the healing and the population, but not that. But that was when you ask me personally, my biggest fear. That's what it was. Is that, and if this doesn't work out, like I don't know what I'm gonna do um, as a man providing for his wife and sons. You know, that was my only fear, and it wasn't that big a one because, man, I work at Walmart. You know what I mean? As long as my family's good, I'm good. You know, but to answer your question, that's what came up for me with that. Man, is, yeah.
I want to talk about the different stuff you do there because,
Okay.
you know, when you and I talked offline, I told you how many people tell me like the place changed them,
Yeah.
you know, at a basic level, it changed them where they really learned to deal with what they were dealing with. Why is your place so different? Because a couple of these guys I've talked to had been to rehabs and had been to all this kind of stuff, and it just clicked when they came to you. So, what's the difference that you're doing, or what are the different things you're doing that's making such a difference?
Yeah. And I'll start with the first one, man, just literally from the ground up, right? And that's the land, right? So, first of all, it's like 543-acre ranch, right? So it's a big space. I mean, even though the campus itself is maybe only about 8 acres, it's a big chunk of land. And there's a lot of Native American background, like Comanche used to run around on here. You know what I mean? There was a lot when we're outside of San Antonio here in Texas, you know what I mean, and outside of Richmond, you know what I mean? So warriors have walked this land and done, you know, and lived and loved and fought, you know, all through here. And so our environment of care is the opposite of the hospital setting, right? Because our population, we don't do well in hospitals in that setting. sterile walls, concrete. I mean, it works good if you're having a surgery and, what I mean, and it's appropriate, but man, when it comes to time to heal my mind, my body, and my spirit, I need nature. I need space. I need room. I need sunshine and rain. You know what I mean? I
Right.
need all those basic elements, and then we go to the people, right? And we, on the client side of the house, on the warrior side of the house is, you're with your peers. You immediately have a peer network, right? Because even though a stateside paramedic and a combat veteran have very different physical experiences, being a state diver and a combat veteran, the things that are eating us up inside, exactly the same. The shame, the guilt, the remorse, the loss, the innocence getting hurt, it's all the same. So it really, and with our population, we speak the same language. It's life and death. You know what I mean? No matter what's going on. So there's an immediate peer network because our mission statement, right? Our mission here is warriors healing warriors because that's the magic. Um, we have our doctors here, right? We have our MDs, we have our MPs, we have our licensed chemical dependency counselors, we have our trauma counselors, our LPCs and LMSWs, and all these professionals, right? And we couldn't do it without them, right? They crack us open emotionally, rip us apart, sew us back together, and then, but but it's warriors healing warriors around the fire pit at night. You know what I mean? When one guy's been the worst day that they've had in their life and another one's been the best day. We got a guy, mentorship doesn't have to be talked about in our population. We see somebody struggling, like we stop what we're doing, help a brother out, or sister out. You know what I mean? Like, so it just naturally occurs. So you got this natural, our community, what I mean, and the love that is within that community and for one another. That's the other thing is you have the immediate peer network. And then whenever it comes down just to how we do it, we've gotten such a bad reputation with a lot of folks because there's still a groups out there that thinks that rehab, because we're rehab, let's be honest what we're doing. Like, hey, we're a drug and alcohol rehab, right? Like you can't stop drinking, you can't stop drugging on your own, so you come and also you can't behave and think the way you want to think and behave and deal with your feelings. So you can't do that on your own. So you're here. That's why we're here. But the things that we do is the intense emotional work, right? We do what's called a lifeline. Simple version is I write my whole life on there, the good, bad, and ugly. And oh, guess what? Then I get to present it to my peers. You know what I mean? A small group. And then we get to do the things that we hate doing. Like I get to sit down with like this black belt counselor, you know what I mean? And they're going to I'm going to be snot bubble crying before it's over with. Like, who wants to do that? Nobody. You know what I mean? But we do it. You know what I mean? So we do the hard, intense work. And then what we also know, because it's designed for warriors by warriors, is that we got to be able to decompress, man, and be constructive, right? So that's why we have more gym time. That's why we have art therapy. We have a metal shop. We have a wood shop. We got fishing. We got jujitsu. You know what I mean? We got, more PT if that's what you need, because we have to be able to process those emotions together. But then there's a time, man, I don't want to hear your voice. I don't want to hear my voice. Like, I just want to bang out in some steel. You know what I mean? Or I want to make something. So or they want to do these art pieces, whatever it is, man. But we all know what the creativity does to the physiology of us, of humans. If I'm in a creative space, and I'm creating something, whatever medium that is, it helps assist to change my physiology, right? And there's a lot of meaning behind it. We've destroyed a lot of things. Now we're creating things, and so it's super, super intense. From the outside, they'll look at our pool and they'll look at our gym and they'll be like, man, this is just a day camp. You know what I mean? Everybody's it's like, hey, there are those aspects, but they're there for a reason. Because there's a way that warriors heal. Like, there's a way that we heal. Like if we get you know what I mean? Let's say if I'm in a gunfight or a fight on the job, you know what I mean? And I get busted up, shot up, bruised up, whatever it is, like I'm not a victim, right? I've experienced the same trauma But someone who gets mugged, right, gets shot and gets beat, the same thing has occurred, but there's two distinct differences. One is a victim and one is a volunteer, right? So we both need the same things, right? We need mind, body, and spirit healing. But with the approach to us, if you approach to me as if I'm a victim to what's happened in my life, we're done.
Right.
It's not your fault, man. To get the fuck out of here, man. You know what I mean? Yeah, it is. I breached that door. What are you talking about, man? Like, so the approach that our clinicians and our language out here is that of a warrior culture. You know what I mean? It's like, we come as volunteers. We still need trauma healing, right? We still need reconciliation and amends to occur. But the approach to it is different. The environment has to be different. Who we're with has to be different, and what we're doing has to be different. So that's why it's different. There's a lot of things that are the same, like the state regulates us, as far as our state licensing, joint commission accredited, all that stuff to be to get TRICARE and to get VA contracts and all that kind of stuff. So state mandates we do some of the stuff, but the rest of the stuff, we're able to do on our own. And between Josh and Lisa and me and Lori as the founders and co-founders, that's what we do out here, and that's what we did and replicated in Virginia. Anyway, I told
So
you.
let's kind of the final question to Warrior's Heart before we get into how they get in touch with you and stuff. When you see someone walk in, right? You see a warrior walk in and they're just a mess.
Yeah.
You know that feeling because you were there. You were that mess.
Yes.
And then you see them do everything that they need to do and get better.
Yeah.
What kind of emotions do you feel through that entire process?
So through the entire process, so when I see that man or woman that is hopeless as that I was, I see that look in their eye, it takes me back to me. I remember exactly what that feels like, and that motivates me to work harder, right? Because I don't ever want to go back there again. Never, ever. But man, but then to watch the transformation, right? The absolute transformation that is mind, body, and spirit is joy. That what I feel with that is absolute. Can't be found anywhere else other than joy, knowing that I was a part of them saving themselves, right? Because we don't save anybody. We don't. That's not what we do. We provide a space. We provide, a secure environment to be emotionally vulnerable. They do all the work, but I know that I'm a part of their journey, and that brings me joy, man. Absolute joy, and that's the juice, man. Why don't I ever get tired of talking about it? Why don't I ever get tired of doing it? Traveling, talking, doing, man, is because it's worth it. And back to that piece, it's because that's what we say when we say out here, Warriors Heart is it's where the lost find their way home. It's where the broken find their power, and it's where the forgotten are remembered forever. I mean, so me being a part of an organization uh, that has those kind of values and provides those kind of services, that yeah, man, there's another saying that we have out here, and that's with my last breath. This is what I'll be doing until.
I can tell from just our conversation today, you still are as emotional about your mission today as the day you started it or the day you even got sober. You can tell it. And when you look back at your life and all the things you did, everything that we've talked about today, do you think that this is the most fulfilling? Being that piece of the puzzle that gets people whole again?
It's the most fulfilling now. But because I've had buddies of mine that have asked me that, and their answer has been their answer has been like everything that they did got them to the point of where they are now, and now they're doing their most important work. I can't say that because whenever I was in the 82nd, that was my most important work. Whenever I was in the group, whenever anywhere, when I became a dad, me and my wife, you know what I mean. So to me, I can honestly say that what I'm doing now, I'm the most prepared for, and I'm the most experienced at, and I can deliver the product after 32 years of, doing it. That's a pretty freaking long time. You know what I mean? But it was, I know I can do it better than someone that hasn't been doing it that way, but it is the most important thing that I have going on in my life today, man. Because like you said, my sobriety, even if I've got gratitude lists a mile long, man, of everything that I have in my life that I'm grateful for. But to date, the number one thing that I have is that is that I'm sober. You know what I mean? Because of that, I have all those things, right? Because if I lose that, then it's all going away, And so me being able to be a part of an organization is just like me being a part of all those other organizations. Is collectively, man, we're doing that, and we're affecting people by the hundreds and now by the thousands. That's freaking awesome. You know what I mean? Like that,
Yeah.
because I don't, and I don't have such a clear answer I can articulate, and it kind of frustrates me a little bit. I'm just not there yet. But it's, man, I know that I wouldn't want to be doing anything other than I'm doing right now. Like I don't. I mean, I'm always gonna miss killing bad guys and blowing up shit, man. You know what I'm saying? I'm American. Like, you know what I mean? That's like America.
Right.
But that phase of my life is over. Now I'm an old broken warrior that my job is to give young guys, you know what I mean, and other guys like me, the way, you know what I mean, the next, because we're still on the warrior path. My job now is to teach, you know what I mean, and to give everything that I learned. It doesn't mean that I don't yearn for Spartan death, you know what I mean, somewhere, sometime doing something, but I ain't looking for it. You know what I mean? I'm
Right.
looking to try to help people, and to still provide what my family needs.
That yeah, that when you were saying that, I was thinking not Spartan. I was thinking you're now the shogun instead of the samurai. I mean, you're you have all that experience and you could turn it on in a moment's notice, but you don't have to. Let's talk about where people can get a hold of you and how they can become part of this if they they feel that they're at that stage in their life where they're ready to take that step.
Yeah, the best way to do it is we've got a bunch of numbers that are out there, and I can give you one that'll flash up there, and it'll be specific to this podcast, which is good. Warriorsheart.com. You know what I mean? If you go there, a number will be on there that you can call, and and that's what I say to do is that. But you can also, there's a text chat button in there because some people don't want to call just wherever you're at. But warriorsheart.com is the way to do it. And when you call that number, what you're going to get is what we call an admissions advocate, right? So they're going to immediately start advocating for you or for your loved one. Because a lot of times it's loved ones that are calling, or friends to calling for other ones. And they'll answer every question that you have um, about anything, you know what I mean? And if for what reason, every reason Warrior's Heart isn't what you need, they will advocate to get you what you do, and for the folks that are out there that were suffering the way that I suffered, what I'll say to them is, please, make that call. Like there is hope. You're not alone. Like, it feels like you're alone. It thinks like you're alone, but you're not. There's an army of people just waiting to assist you and along on the journey, man. And it's not hopeless.
Now, two separate campuses, correct?
Yes, two campuses.
Okay. Let's talk about the difference or I guess the similarities between the two separate and where they're at.
Yeah, so the one is in Bandera, Texas, which is about an hour outside of San Antonio, Northwest. And then the other one is about an hour out of Richmond in Milford, Virginia, which is about an hour northeast outside of Richmond. So we got the same, it's like kind of like Burger King. Some of our, yeah, I mean, our curriculum is the same. The people, our culture is the same. We do the same thing on the same days, different time zone, and 1 hour difference is the only difference. Difference in the facilities. We don't have our canine program up yet, but we will by the end of the year in the Virginia. In Texas, we have our canine. We don't have a pool in Virginia. We have a pool in Texas, but we've still got two big lakes. We've got everything else is exactly the same. And usually the people picking the two. Sometimes we end up in a case where we'll have an opening or a bed ready in one location and not the other. But a lot of times it's preference, whatever works out best for the individual. Some people need to be away from their home area, you know what I mean, and come up, and some people need to be closer to it. But other than the little bit of the physical differences that we have, it's the exact same things that we do.
All right, where can people find you? This is social media, website. Let's hit the website again, but all the social media, all that kind of stuff where they can get you.
Yeah, it's most of it is Warrior's Heart. Some of it is on Warrior's Heart Healing. I'll have to get all that information to you. I know I'm supposed to have it right here on hand, but we might have to make an edit or something.
Do you have any social media?
We do. We have on me personally, or
well, the organization.
The organization is all the Warrior's Heart.
Okay.
It's either Warrior's Heart Healing or Warrior's Heart. If you search any of them, it'll be on there.
And personally,
I have one. It's called a One Fact Finder. The number one and then Fact Finder on the Instagram.
Okay.
That's pretty much it.
Oh, okay. All right, man. This has been so fucking awesome. I love that you came on here, man. This is, I mean, I feel like we didn't even scratch the surface. There's so much more we can go into. My plan is I would love to come down to one of the places and film with you there and show the people what's going on. I think that's the only way that you can really show how it's happening.
Let's do it, man. We love getting everybody on the property. It sounds good and it is good, but once you get on the property, man, then you kind of
right.
Yeah, man. So anytime.
Yeah, this has been so great. I'm so honored that you came on here. Guys, you know where you can find Tom, or you'll know as he hands me all the information where you can find Tom. Let's talk about where you can find me. As always, you can find me on Instagram, the DTD_podcast. You can find me on Facebook at the DTD podcast, and you can find me on YouTube where all these conversations, they're in video form at Dynamic Tales Delivered Podcast, DTD Podcast. Put it in there. It'll take you right to it. Make sure you comment, share, like all those things that people tell you to do. Be a friend, tell a friend, subscribe to the channel. All of those things I have to tell you, do those things. Leave us comments. Tell us who you want us to talk to, what stories that you would like to see. Talking about that, let's talk about the guy that makes this show happen. NOMADICResearch.com. My buddy Hoot over there. You want t-shirts, hats, backpacks, anything to make you look cool in your life. You want one of these t-shirts? They're there. NOMADICResearch.com. Get a hold of me. I'll give you a special code. You can leave me a direct message, however you want to do it, and I'll get you a code for there. NOMADICResearch.com. Do not forget to go there if you want to look cool in your life, anywhere you're going. Guys, that's going to be it for this week. That's Tom. I'm DJ. This has been the show. We'll catch you guys on the next one. See you later. This episode brought to you by Nomadic Research, built for the wild and forged in adversity. Somewhere between the front lines and the firelight, a vision was born. The founders of Nomadic Research spent years in the harshest environments on Earth, where grit and resilience weren't just words, but a way of life. They saw a need for gear that could handle anything. Gear that wasn't just built, but built to last. From battlefields to backcountry trails, every piece of Nomadic Research gear is designed with one mission: unyielding performance for those who refuse to quit. The founders believe in patriotism, personal responsibility, and the freedom of the great outdoors, because adventure isn't just a weekend escape, it's a way of life. Born in the heart of Afghanistan, forged in adversity, and built for the wild, Nomadic Research is gear for those who go further. You can start your adventure at nomadicresearch.com.